Ruby examines a rare flower Lloyd gathered, reminding him that fresh ingredients decide the quality of every alchemy result. She looms over him, coldly rejecting his work as substandard, dismissing his explanation and demanding perfection without excuses. Years earlier, before alchemy defined his life, Lloyd spent his youth working a simple job at a drugstore. He recalls the phantom flower, a rare bloom he risked his life for over 3 sleepless days, only to watch Ruby toss it straight into the trash. Publicly, Ruby is celebrated as a brilliant, beloved alchemist adored by the entire kingdom. Her true treatment of Lloyd hidden from everyone. Ruby snaps in fury, insisting everything made in her lab must be top quality. While Lloyd silently brands her a devil in disguise, she storms into his workspace declaring his latest gathered materials another failed attempt, leaving him stunned in disbelief. Alchemy runs on 2 roles: an alchemist who designs recipes and mixes them, and an assistant mage who collects the raw materials. Ruby's compounding success rate stands at a flawless 100%, proof of her genius reputation across the kingdom. Lloyd, holding a fragile flower, admits his own success rate at gathering materials sits at a mere 40%. Ruby storms into the guild, blaming Lloyd for Addery's falling reputation, while others note assistant mages usually gather far above his rate. Lloyd apologizes for missing her deadline, but Ruby snaps back, questioning whether he even understands his duty to satisfy her demands. Bystanders mock him openly, calling him the kingdom's worst gatherer, and Ruby herself brands him useless, goofy, and too slow to do his job right. She lashes out further, ordering him to stop apologizing since it only irritates her more, leaving him quietly worn down by the constant scolding. Society brands him incompetent, and Ruby dismisses his objections entirely, insisting he has no right to question her even as she breaks things around him in frustration. Overwhelmed by the endless abuse, Lloyd finally reaches his breaking point, deciding deep down that this suffering has to stop. He confronts Ruby directly, declaring he is done being her assistant mage and announcing his departure from Addery for good. Ruby stares back in genuine confusion, caught completely off guard by his sudden declaration. Lloyd insists their partnership ends today, yet Ruby brushes past his resolve, casually reminding him to be home by evening for curry. Irritated by his stubborn nature, she tells him not to bother with formalities and just leave quickly, before he summons his item box and departs. Determined to escape his miserable life, Lloyd rushes to pack his belongings, ready to head anywhere far from that suffocating household. Even now, Ruby tries pulling him back as her errand boy slipping in one last request before he tosses it straight into his storage box. Sitting alone in the city square, Lloyd watches children play, unsure where his newfound freedom should even take him. A dragon soars overhead, and he suddenly catches himself instinctively reaching for Earl Grey tea, realizing how deeply her habits still control him. Watching the dragon glide freely through the sky, Lloyd envies its freedom, spreading its wings without answering to anyone at all. Overwhelmed by grief, Lloyd vows to start over and live freely like the dragon above, crying as passers-by mock his tears. A carriage carries him toward a distant town where nobody knows his past, giving him hope for a fresh beginning. Inside the carriage, a cheerful girl and a shy elf sit pressed close together, teasing each other about how narrow the space is. The pair grow flustered over their closeness, their playful bickering filling the carriage with an unmistakably romantic atmosphere. Lloyd quietly admits he admires the girl, though he sees their bond as more servant and noble than lovers, wishing they'd remember he is still there. Memory drifts back years earlier to when a young Ruby scolded a crying Lloyd outside an orphanage, telling him to stop apologizing and just admit he was hungry. She declares her ambition to become the country's best alchemist, so she could finally live like nobility despite growing up in that same orphanage with him. Moved by her resolve, young Lloyd tearfully agrees to become her assistant mage, sealing their partnership right there. The two chased their separate paths with everything they had, and their combined effort built Addery into a name known throughout the kingdom. Reflecting bitterly, Lloyd realizes how arrogant Ruby became afterward, and how much his own spirit wore down beside her. Just as the carriage suddenly jolts to a stop, Lara teases Lloyd for sounding shady until the coachman suddenly screams outside, prompting the group to peek out and investigate together. A massive worm monster erupts from beneath the ground, its jagged form towering over the stranded carriage and terrified travelers. The knight vows to protect Lara even at the cost of his life, though he privately doubts he is strong enough to win, as Lara blurts out her love for him mid-crisis. Grateful for Lloyd's presence, the couple begs him for advice on fighting the creature, since he claims to have faced it before, leaving him and Ruby stunned that a couple would ever speak so openly. Lloyd calmly reveals the worm's weak point is its head, and with that single piece of advice, The knight strikes true and brings the beast down. Panicking over the beast's size, the couple mocks Lloyd as an unreliable introvert while pressuring him to come up with a real plan. Without warning, a massive explosion rips through the battlefield, catching everyone off guard as the worm's body is engulfed entirely. A towering magic circle blazes above the destruction, its light illuminating Lloyd as devastating power tears through the creature. He casually explains he could obliterate the whole body, not just the head, leaving the group stunned and quietly declaring his earlier advice pointless. Lyra stares in shock at the sheer scale of the attack magic, questioning why Lloyd himself seems completely unfazed by something so extraordinary. Lyra rages that his magic is clearly cheating, dismissing his previous claim of being an average mage, leaving him genuinely confused by the accusation. The coachman admits shock at witnessing such powerful explosion magic, while Lyra argues even an elderly person carrying a staff could be dismissed as a mage. Overwhelmed with admiration, Lyra drops to her knees begging him to become her teacher and finally show her real magic. Stunned by the sudden reverence, Lloyd struggles to process being called master after years of being branded worthless and incompetent. Delighted by the idea, Lyra dreams of casting magic just like his, insisting only a truly good person would answer her eager questions. So honestly, grateful for the lesson, the pair apologize for their earlier rudeness, while Lloyd smiles gently, telling them only to use magic responsibly going forward, curious about his true identity. Lyra asks who he really is, since she idolizes Ruby the alchemist and speaks proudly of her legendary inventions. The couple gushes over articles mocking Lloyd the incompetent mage, admitting they wish him ill for constantly dragging Ruby's reputation down. Lloyd quietly reveals that he is that very same hated mage, leaving both of them frozen in stunned, horrified silence. Despite the awkward reveal, the group reconciles warmly, encouraging him to have more confidence as he begins his fresh start at Minerva, introducing himself simply as Lloyd Nelver. His newfound friends jokingly imagine a flashier, delinquent version, urging him to embrace confidence and change. Determined to leave people like Ruby behind, Lloyd sets his sights on a carefree new routine, finally arriving at Minerva after 3 weeks of travel. Standing before the lively city, he declares his second life is truly beginning, ready to embrace whatever comes next alongside his new companions. That peace shatters at night as a massive explosive force tears through the town, leaving him staring up at its jagged, otherworldly aftermath. A striking, mysterious woman descends before him, declaring his wickedness ends here, leaving Lloyd stunned that his fresh start has already spiraled into new danger. Hours earlier, Lloyd marvels at Minerva's lively streets, learning it is a prosperous adventuring hub despite being 3 weeks from the capital by carriage. Mars and Lyra invite him to join their adventuring life, though he insists he is not the type, quietly noting how similar it sounds to his old job. The pair cheerfully promise to help him build his second life, right as a communicator interrupts, announcing itself as a service for troubled souls. Over lunch, Lyra teases him for being cheap despite already covering her carriage meals, while suggesting guide work among his job possibilities. Struggling to picture his future, Lloyd finally scribbles out a wish list, ruling out adventuring, dungeons, school, labs, and mercenary work. Unaware small demons mock him in the background for abandoning his dreams for Ruby. A tool shop idea intrigues Lloyd, but his dream twists into a nightmare where Ruby bursts in demanding free materials, leaving him powerless to refuse her. The vision shifts to carpentry, where his careful work earns nothing but Ruby's scorn, screaming that an assistant mage has no business rebuilding anything properly. In another daydream, Lyra happily proposes they become adventurers together, calling him sensei with genuine warmth and admiration. Mars and Lyra reassure him that choosing to return to Aerie is entirely his decision, insisting the fear of Ruby finding out is nothing to worry about. Moved by their sincerity, Lloyd realizes he has finally shed his fear of Ruby, growing hopeful about embracing the adventurer's path his new friends offer him. Standing tall with newfound confidence, Lloyd declares himself a changed man, ready to embrace this fresh identity as an aspiring adventurer. Walking freely through town, he savors the simple joy of no longer fearing anyone's judgment, calling it a genuine milestone in his new life. Lyra explains the saint's sacred role in the Emerald Church, then jokingly warns that mistaking her statue for an old lady could get someone executed abroad. Full of energy, Lloyd announces plans to train and prepare for his guild debut, leaving Lyra amused that his enthusiasm might be a little much. That night, thugs corner him demanding money, but before they can finish threatening him, Lloyd calmly declares his adventuring days won't end here. Recognizing the devastating ice spear as extremely advanced magic, Lloyd watches in shock as jagged shards tear through the street, scattering everyone caught nearby. The mysterious woman orders him to stay put, her commanding presence leaving both Lloyd and a startled onlooker frozen in place. The thugs snarl threats, daring anyone to challenge them, while Lloyd worries what happens if she unleashes that spell again, prompting her reluctant agreement to hold back. She unleashes physical enhancement instead, her fist connecting with such force that the entire town risks being buried under solid ice. Afterwards, she apologizes sheepishly for the destruction, as Lloyd calmly explains that Ice Spear, though powerful, is far too difficult for a situation calling for simpler beginner spells. Lloyd thanks the priest, like woman, for saving him, though he notices her powerful magic and can't help wondering just who she really is. She insists on treating his bleeding cheek, brushing off his protest that it is merely a scratch as she leans in close to help. Their sudden closeness leaves both flustered, hearts racing, as she explains her skill in healing magic while tending to the wound. They introduce themselves, Iris and Lloyd, both laughing over the coincidence that they'd each just arrived in town on the very same day. When Lloyd admits he is an adventurer, Iris beams with such a bright, genuine smile that it leaves him completely stunned. Iris admits she is currently unemployed, while an onlooker gushes that a mage like Lloyd must surely be a great adventurer, embarrassing him despite his denial. As night falls, Iris mentions her attendant waits for her, prompting a bystander to jokingly beg the princess not to leave him alone in the dark. Samana calls out Princess, bowing respectfully and apologizing for their selfishness in addressing her so familiarly as Prince Lloyd looks on. Iris shyly asks Lloyd to help her find her way home, and he eagerly agrees to do anything, stunned that she'd ask him a favor at all. Lara later spins an elaborate love triangle fantasy involving an exiled prince, a heartbroken princess, and a jealous alchemist X, teasing that things are finally getting interesting between them all. An archer threatens to shoot Iris through the head if she moves, revealing she is secretly in the middle of restocking her coupling ingredients right there. An arrow fired wildly ends up striking the Adventurers Guild sign itself, sending debris crashing through the building's window in chaos. Lara cheerfully wishes him luck, quoting an oddly specific romance novel line while directing him toward the guild to ask for proper directions. Inside, a knight and another man ask Lloyd and Iris for help, though the murderous glare in the room leaves both of them deeply unsettled. A man erupts furiously over a defiled portrait of the beloved saint, an arrow lodged in the picture, demanding to know which one of them was responsible. The men recognize Lloyd as the incompetent mages holding back the kingdom's top alchemist, while Iris privately worries about hiding her own poor magic skills from him. Lloyd summons ensnaring vines to bind the attackers, trapping them completely as their blades prove powerless against the twisting plant magic. The vines wrap so tightly around the men that it creates an unintentionally lewd spectacle, drawing the guild chief's horrified attention to the chaotic scene. A stern armored woman appears above them, and Iris gasps in recognition, calling out to her as Isolde. San in stunned disbelief. Confused onlookers demand answers, and Iris explains that Isolde once served as her personal bodyguard, leaving Lloyd surprised she has such a connection. Isolde was shocked because she didn't expect to see Iris Elzerbel Charlotte, the saint of Holy Roland, in a place like this. Kneeling with urgency, the association extended heartfelt regrets for their earlier disrespect towards Saint Iris. Amid the crowd, a few skeptics wondered her value, dismissing her as just a holy one from another land. Their ignorance was swiftly corrected. She wielded the unusual and formidable holy law strength. This holy energy cleansed tainted regions, transforming them into busy, existence-rich territories. Because birth, her homeland had safeguarded her, as solely single saintess is born per nation. Lloyd was shocked to recall that Iris once claimed to be unemployed regardless of her esteemed arrival. The association enforcer burst into the chamber, enraged, declaring punishment for those who dared offend a holy one. Alarm expanded as the culprits pleaded for mercy, filled by the sudden demotion to E rank. Stepping forward, Iris explained she had renounced her sainthood and pleaded for leniency on their behalf. Her unforeseen declaration left the enforcer silent and fully bewildered. Lloyd was puzzled by Iris's sudden declaration, questioning how she was able to abandon her saintly status. Everyone nearby him grew anxious, fearing the consequences if devout followers discovered the reality. To their surprise, the believers wept with envy, inspired by her unselfish defense of everyone. Isolde, though hesitant, promised to forgive them so lengthy as Iris stayed sincere moving forward. Elsewhere, a fresh wave of Holy One worship burst, leaving Lloyd both amazed and overwhelmed. As the sun rose over the silent city, Lloyd reflected on the trouble they had just overcome. He expressed remorse for dragging Iris into his troubles, yet she kindly rejected the blame. She explained her evening solo had become her initial true memory as an ordinary person. Having lived as a holy one every her existence, Iris currently began to grasp her own identity. Aunt's praise, she grinned softly, saying his gratitude wasn't necessary. Iris teased Lloyd for speaking too formally, speaking him royal with a light smirk. Struggling to give anything unique, Lloyd at last asked if she wanted to visit the clock tower. Lacking hesitation, he employed sorcery to lift her into his arms and ascended in one bound. From the rooftop, the city stretched beneath them under a starlit heavens. Iris respected the breathtaking view. Softly gripped in Lloyd's arms flank by flank, they respected the glowing streetlights powered by old magical stones. Recalling quieter times, he remembered gazing at the city from afar throughout his lonely resource hunts. As dawn approached, he told her to keep seeing the instant wasn't over still. Morning sunlight bathed the rooftops, causing the stones to sparkle like expanded stars across the city. Regardless of his past, he acknowledged feeling like just a weary runaway rather than someone unique. With pride in her tone, she told her popular view. Speaking him a special friend, a silent wish followed to find her own area in the vast, lovely realm. His spirit swelled and lacking hesitation. He softly took her palm. Seconds afterward, an awkward fall disrupted the harmony, drawing a startled scream from above. Flustered, he apologized, admitting he just wished to meet her demands. Laughter burst out abruptly, catching both of them off guard. She called him odd, still grinned kindly, admitting he'd already exceeded her expectations. Relaxation, she said, was every she wished for, just peaceful periods told with a companion. Elsewhere, an energetic woman stated victory from afar, claiming it every went according to scheme. Gaze locked in curiosity, someone stepped ahead, eager to hear greater about this unfolding tale. In the royal city, Ruby's workshop stood under growing pressure. Annoyance boiled over as delayed alchemy commands caused complaints from clients and co-workers alike. An auditor reached with poor news due to latest failures. The atelier's grade would drop to B. Desperation kicked in as she pleaded, fearing the damage to her credibility. Boiling with wrath, she blamed Lloyd's 3-week absence for the spiraling disaster. She silently blamed the rest of the atelier rod for the ongoing mess. Fury intensified as she remembered being refused, convinced that Lloyd had set the bar too reduced. Annoyance turned to paranoia, assuming jealousy from everyone was the real cause of sabotage. Resolved to move ahead, she swore to replace Lloyd and become a top-class chemist herself. Lloyd stood apart from the Adventurer Guild, uneasily waiting for his companions who were nowhere to be seen. Seconds afterward, a tall lady reached, dragging 2 unconscious figures, his missing teammates, across the floor. She explained an incident had made her to question them thoroughly. Turning to Lloyd, she named rumors surrounding him and required to know why he came to this city. Shocked by the intense questioning, Lloyd stared in disbelief, wondering if this was really an interrogation. Earlier, within the Grim Guild's interrogation chamber, Lyra rested restrained as Mars was questioned. Her silence startled Mars, who panicked at her inability to speak. The interrogator calmly explained that she had cast silencing sorcery to avoid arcane retaliation. With suspicion growing, she required answers, accusing Mars of foreign espionage or religious extremism. Lyra panicked internally, fearing Mars might reveal her odd motive and ruin them both. She frantically told Mars to invent a believable excuse, hoping to avoid embarrassment. Rather, he bluntly explained her real intention to act as a cupid of love. Alarm rose across Lyra's thoughts as she realized he missed her warning completely. As she silently despaired, Mars explained her romantic ideals, referencing her popular novel. With a pleased grin, he stated honesty might save them, much to Lyra's horror. Presently, Lloyd watched his teammates collapse following their chaotic reasoning, mortified by the interrogation. Isolde, withholding punishment, commanded them to labor unpaid for a month as reparation. She reflected on Lloyd, rejected as useless in the royal city, still strong enough to defeat a rank adventurers. Doubt crept in as she remembered his ties to both latest incidents and Holy One Iris's surprise visit. Fearing potential threat, she considered expelling him for the association's safety and Minerva's protection. As Mars greeted him cheerfully, suspicion silently stayed in Isolde's thoughts. Caught off guard by her question, he fumbled across a nervous denial. Lacking warning, she stated the recruitment test had already begun, leaving him shocked. Their destination gripped an unfamiliar relic known as the Trial Crystal, capable of measuring hidden strength. Besides evaluation, it apparently worked many other odd purposes, immense him with its versatility. Curiosity raised as he discovered the crystal was able to determine Single's true professional path. A newfound faith appeared, possibly he was able to find work that matched him better. Isolde, seeing carefully, believed the crystal might expose anything deeper inside him. They arrived at the towering Temple of the Winds, in which the relic awaited on the highest floor. On their method up, he wondered if she, too, had once sought her aim across the crystal. Just as he wondered her past, a sudden shift in aura signaled close threat beneath. giant insects ambushed fellow explorers, forcing him to recognize the threat black spider and beetle. Mars and Lara stepped ahead assuredly, declaring the circumstance under their control as Class B explorers. Regardless of heavy resistance, still divine aid couldn't stop the monsters from swarming the corridors. Slashing across with wind sorcery, Isolde stated complete extermination the association's ultimate responsibility. A sharp leap and precise strike sent the spider flying under a burst of physical enhancement. Lightning rose from his rod, halting an ambush just in moment with pinpoint accuracy. Observers watched in disbelief, his movements efficient, his control ideal. Contrary to his rumored incompetence, Hans asked how he'd look stronger foes. He lightly described a plan involving 16 magical explosions. Her thoughts spiraled. Either he was lying or he really possessed frightening, careless arcane power. Everyone collected for a break, and tea was worked with light banter and mild complaints. Mars provided a food to the party, sparking mild panic over its origin. Isolde's pride took a hit once they paused, questioning whether her cooking was edible. Taste exceeded demands. Expressions lit up as they enjoyed the unusual heated meal in a dungeon. With steady dignity, she explained her noble heritage and personal drive to mentor every ability. Following a clumsy question about her training outcomes, she abruptly finished the conversation and marched off. Lyra silently gave her suspicion possibly Isolde was hiding anything from the crystal's reading. He acknowledged that several truths are personal. Still, curiosity yet remained as they climbed the stairway. At the summit, the lengthy awaited trial crystal stood shining in the shrine's last chamber. Isolde at last activated it, revealing her S-grade strength and mastery of advanced sorcery and swordsmanship. A question about Isolde's vocation triggered the crystal, prompting immediate worry. Despite of her protests, the rankings started revealing her top roles, starting with martial artist. Alarm escalated as Holy Knight emerged in new area, and she desperately tried to stop it. Then, to everyone's surprise, the crystal stated her #1 vocation baker. Shocked silence covered the chamber prior to her flushed face gave way to embarrassed outrage. Clumsy silence fell following Isolde's unforeseen confession, with everyone uncertain how to respond. Lacking warning, an enormous griffin burst from its pedestal, launching an assault on the group. What they mistook for a statue turned out to be a lethal guardian, currently fully awake. In single swift motion, the being devoured the crystal whole, leaving everyone in surprise. Lloyd screamed in despair, realizing his lengthy-awaited vocation outcomes had just been swallowed forever. A griffin swooped across the city heavens, clutched a glowing crystal in its talons. Regardless of the strong magic, the being dodged mid-air. Explosions burst nearby it as Lloyd shoved harder. The heavens cracked with thunder sorcery, shattering section of a spire beneath the beast. Amid the wreckage, Lloyd apologized as everyone wondered his judgment. With urgency, a swordswoman rallied the party to conclusion the threat prior to greater damage followed. The party wandered across the maze like shrine, uncertain where the creature had vanished. Single of them shouted a random question, hoping to lure it out, employing the crystal's unknown properties. Surprisingly, the crystal glowed in response, and the party spotted the trail just as someone named Fluffy Pancakes. Curious about its function, Lloyd asked a deeper question about a companion's ability. Yet, the crystal stayed quiet, having already granted that answer. Once, with urgency in her tone, Isolde required everyone focus on saving lives over worrying about her. Lloyd stiffened, uncertain of what question to ask, as the party stood awkwardly behind him. As inquiries poured in, answers explained her popular animal and her talent in wind sorcery. She hesitantly acknowledged her love for romance novels, drawing surprise reactions. The questioning escalated into personal territory, leaving Isolde covered by their curiosity. Lloyd cast a speed-enhancing magic to close the gap, launching the party ahead at elevated velocity. Still, the rapid movement proved too greatly. Mars struggled to maintain balance and braced for impact. He plummeted from the ledge, jokingly vowing to defend his comrade yet in death. Elsewhere, explorers climbed the spire, pushing across fatigue and doubts under heavy pressure. As several ridiculed a fellow member's appearance, everyone silently respected her strength and tough training. As trouble burst, a griffin assaulted as the crystal revealed another strange answer about pajamas. Lloyd and his party crashed down beside the beast at last, closing and following a long pursuit. Isolde commanded the evacuation of novices as Lloyd readied for a last confrontation. He fired a strong liquid magic, hoping to push the griffin outside for a decisive strike. Intent and resolved, Lloyd vowed to retrieve the crystal, as Isolde wondered his intense fixation. Rumors painted Lloyd as a frail sorcerer, yet his profound monster knowledge and versatile magic told a different story. Questions surrounding his obsession with the crystal stirred unease amid his allies. A shocking image explained Lloyd manipulating Holy One Iris, casting doubt on his intentions. Single of their companions employed silent sorcery filled with emotion and blame. To everyone's surprise, she had mastered a mighty variant thanks to Lloyd's help in secret. A fierce blast fired from over, striking the griffin's skull on as it recoiled in surprise. With the beast beat, the crystal was at last expelled from its mouth, drawing gasps from the party. As they scrambled for it, Lloyd arrived out and made his wish to learn his real speaking. The answer echoed plainly. He was destined to be Ruby's attendant. In silent will, Lloyd acknowledged he had been studying alchemy solely to support her. Ruby happily stated Lloyd her helper, burning his cautiously written notes in the process. Crumbling under pressure, Lloyd acknowledged he obeyed her solely to avoid ridicule and rejection. Prior to he was able to process his emotions, the griffin fired a surprise assault. In a bold move, Isolde intervened, telling him that he controls his fate, not the crystal. With firm will, she shouted her pride in choosing her route still if it wasn't ideal. Lloyd stared at Isolde in awe. Inspired by her courage and will, they coordinated their scheme. She might force the griffin out of the spire and he might deliver the final blow. Jointly, they released a destructive combo of wind and thunderstorm sorcery, blasting the creature away amid the shattered crystal was softly recovered. With harmony restored, the party chuckled as former doubts gave way to new trust and understanding. Isolde provided support, assuring Lloyd that improve was feasible in their new home. Curious and caring, she asked the crystal for Lloyd's popular meal explained to be pot au feu. To celebrate his triumph, she vowed to treat him, lighting up his look with joy. Lloyd passed the explorer's trial and was welcomed by companions and guildmates alike. Currently section of a party, he was invited to enter a quest the very next day. Isolde awkwardly hinted at her availability, covertly hoping to be invited on the journey. Following light requests and joking from the party, she reluctantly agreed to join, earning smiles all around. Seeing them interact, Lloyd silently felt a sense of belonging and faith for his next step. Periods afterward, existence in Minerva resumed peacefully at a cozy inn. A cheerful chef worked Iris a heated, handcrafted breakfast, marking a soft, fresh beginning. The chef was shocked to learn Iris had skipped breakfast to practice sorcery, leaving his menu untouched. Her improvement in behavior because arriving in Minerva grew clear even to the staff. Suspicious, Nero pressed Cytherea for answers, wondering if Lloyd's arrival influenced her transformation. Cytherea explained that Iris had snuck out to see Lloyd and currently looked ahead to their meetings. Outraged he hadn't heard sooner, Nero panicked and required details, sparking still greater panic and noise. Lloyd failed on a soft, oversized pudding, unaware of what awaited him. Meanwhile, Nero silently stated his intention to enter the following escort mission. With a made grin and ominous tone, Nero anticipated their next step meeting, prompting the Rod to nervously arrange a second escort for safety. At the Explorers Association, a party returned initial from a mission expected to take days. Despite of claiming elite status, two members privately acknowledged they hadn't done anything. Elsewhere, a lady bore an enormous cake, explaining it was for her subordinates who liked her baking. She turned to Lloyd, pushing him to complete an appeal on his own. Lloyd, caught off guard, was reminded he yet managed duties for everyone. He enjoyed a peaceful existence, happily claiming sluggish living as the finest. As several requested meals, single lady accused another of being overly attached to him. Resolved to think, she told herself to create space and left Lloyd to handle commissions in the Great Forest Vid. He reviewed duties, aiming to finish several objectives rapidly, containing a goblin subjugation mission that just concluded. An idea from his companion hinted he was able to skip rest employing sorcery, sparking a new idea. Sudden alarm burst as someone pointed out the contradiction between serving non-stop and wanting a sluggish-paced life, claiming he lacked any personal ambition or clean aim in his so-called peaceful lifestyle. Made meal and commands rained down, pushing him to eat rapidly and get back to work. Struggling with the pressure, he paused as recollections of a heated meal gently surfaced. Resolved, he stated he'd cook not for everyone yet for himself and named pot au feu as his choice. Curry was the preferred option for several, yet pot au feu gripped sentimental value from childhood days in the orphanage. Employing fresh materials and well liquid, he poured passion into making a version distant beyond what he once knew. Abruptly, a demand for curry cut across the air, throwing off his focus. Just then, a woman returned unconscious across the liquid, catching him fully off guard. Dragged from the liquid, she chuckled uneasily, admitting to being caught in an embarrassing moment. As practicing sorcery beside Minerva, she deep control and ended up carried downstream by the river. Recollections of her servants made her anxious, convinced they were growing concerned with every passing hour. He provided to cook his popular food and aid once her clothes dried, which she gratefully accepted. Curry appeared in the pot, sparking surprise and a sense of rivalry from those close. Filled, he sank into self-doubt, incapable to cook properly, speaking himself useless regardless of everyone's support. She had silently taken over cooking and poured caution into every step. Praising his work with a vivid grin, she called his cooking really good, leaving him flustered and grateful. Talk turned to Ruby, his sorcerer companion. Curry, her popular dish, came up as a told recollection. He spoke with envy, downplaying his own position as recalling her major ambition. Her heated remarks reminded him of his value, helping everyone, even quietly, still held deep meaning. One idea crossed his thoughts. Spending a silent life alongside Iris felt like a beautiful dream. Starting up, he acknowledged that distancing himself from Ruby hadn't fixed anything, and that improve required to start within, explaining how her lack of improve cost her status. As a wholly one, realization hit. Regardless of being jointly, he knew nearly nothing about her. As laughter covered the air over a told food, anything unexpected caused a burst of surprise. Hidden in the bushes, a fellow watched anxiously, alarmed by what Lloyd was giving Iris. Beside the flame, Iris described how Sophelia had devoured every dish Nero had readied. Curiosity raised in Lloyd as he noticed the joy Iris radiated as speaking about her servants. Abruptly, a smiling woman approached, catching both of them off guard with her unforeseen arrival. Clothes damp and look flat, the attendant remarked she had returned still farther downstream than usual. With a graceful lower, she presented herself as Teruru, Iris's faithful attendant and head maid. Teruru reached with Sophelia's belongings, surprised to learn Iris had come every that method solo. Frustrated, Teruru rebuked Iris for recklessly practicing advanced sorcery, causing mood to rise. Reflecting silently, Iris wondered whether employing her strength to help others might be a better path forward. Lloyd stepped in, proposing he take responsibility for guiding Iris across sorcery training. With everyone's approval, Iris beamed, complete of trust in Lloyd's strength and aid. As the party walked towards a wide clearing, panic rose about why Teruru had followed them. Nero inspected the area, criticizing the lack of full tools and suspecting someone's cooking. Teruru lightly sampled the meal, claiming it was to test for poison, as trouble stirred behind her. She handed over a radish as praising the curry, comparing it fondly to Nero's usual dishes. Driven by duty, Nero took a bite and stiffened, shocked by the flavor he didn't expect. Nero was covered by the curry's ideal texture and balance, comparing it to a royal feast. Regardless of its excellence, he sensed anything ominous inside, declaring it an abnormal dish. Elsewhere, Lloyd instructed Iris in liquid sorcery as suspicions about the curry's origins silently grew. With assurance, Iris responded to her mentor, summoning an immense wave with decision energy. As liquid rose uncontrollably, worry expanded. But Iris cheerfully insisted everything was under control. Iris stated her determination to improve, and Lloyd vowed to aid her no cost what. Reflecting on his own experience, Lloyd remembered how he initially discovered liquid dragon magic. That recollection took him again to an eager instant in the desert where survival awakened his power. Elsewhere, everyone secured the region, ensuring Iris was secure from the river's reach. Despite of pleas and curry, Nero commanded Sophelia to eliminate Lloyd, fearing the threat he posed. Sophelia fired a fierce radish slash, triggering an enormous blast that shocked everyone watching. Lloyd responded with his water dragon magic, unleashing a strong surge as trouble burst around them. From the liquid, Nero attempted to issue commands, yet Sophelia had already eaten the key ingredient. Teruru stormed in criticism Nero for pushing Sophelia too distant anew with careless schemes. Just then, a monstrous legion fish appeared, threatening them every with its immense arrival. A mighty flame arrow ignited the field, shaking the swarm's formation with explosive force. Regardless of the strike, waves of fish kept their unyielding charge, overwhelming all defenses. Lacking hesitation, a burst of ice spear sorcery pierced the swarm, freezing the route forward. Shards burst across the liquid surface, causing alarm as unintended consequences took hold. A sudden hail of frozen enemies descended, catching everyone off guard mid-sorcery. Lacking hesitation, Teruru hurled herself over Iris, shielding her from the incoming barrage. Everyone watched in horror as the impact fired them across the liquid surface. Amid the trouble, Nero battled again fiercely, slashing across the fish. With sudden fury, once the dust cleared, worry stayed both had endured, but something was clearly wrong. Lying motionless amid the wreckage, Teruru didn't respond, leaving Iris frozen in surprise. Gaze widened as alarm set in single mistaken move, and Teruru would be lost to the current. Sorcery rose from Iris's outstretched palm, summoning a mighty water dragon to turn the tide. Determination burned in her tone. She rejected to let anyone suffer as she stood by. Every watched in awe as the swirling waters responded, faith flickering again into their gaze. Encased in a protective sphere, Teruru reappeared, secure, her rescue complete as Iris failed in relief. The party rushed ahead, cries Tairuru's identity as she collapsed onto the ground. Faint yet conscious, she unsealed her gaze and softly commended the beauty of Iris's magic. Lloyd watched in silence, realizing she had employed the strength he once required for survival selflessly. A heated grin shaped as envy swelled within him, deeply moved by her resolve. Nero approached, apologizing with sincerity and gratitude, bridging trust in which conflict once stood. With a straight look, Lloyd presented a freshly readied Legion fish sashimi platter, baffling everyone close. As gratitude covered the air, Tairuru and Iris exchanged heartfelt remarks as Nero flailed in worry. Vivid-eyed and smiling, Iris praised her mentor with sincerity that caught him fully off guard. Filled, Lloyd fired himself skyward in surprise, covered with joy over her progress and praise. Again at the kitchen, notice shifted. The unusual Legion fish hinted at troubling changes beside Minerva. Doubt covered the air as the party wondered whether the beast attack was mere coincidence. Lloyd remembered encounters with other elevated class beasts, proof that anything abnormal was unfolding. In Minerva talk turned to the Temple of Winds, in which single such being had mysteriously emerged. Temples were once sanctuaries, currently yet they seemed vulnerable to rising threats. Gaze turned to the crumbling shrine. Ominous signs pointed to deeper troubles awaiting inside. The scientist channeled her sorcery to uphold a protective shield nearby the shrine. A party discovered signs of disruption beside the Shrine of Winds, suspecting an abnormality linked to the shrine's defense. On arrival, they witnessed an enormous breach tearing across the arcane barrier, threatening the structure's integrity. The party regrouped beyond, realizing everyone had sensed the disturbance and collected in response. Reunited, the wounded were tended to, confirming the urgent threat looming over the realm. Signs of a fierce fight were evident as the party discovered about the latest Griffin assault. Amid alarm, they confirmed the crater was caused by the intense clash, not a natural phenomenon. Due to the saintess's distance at distinct shrine, her return might be delayed for 2 weeks. Resolving to act, the current scientist volunteered to perform a purification ritual profound within the shrine. As preparations started, different companion requested Lloyd's aid as the ritual to restore the barrier neared. Appeal was made for Lloyd to accompany Iris into the shrine's deepest chamber, despite of his own doubts. Trust in Lloyd's reliability comforted everyone, putting their worries at ease. As they readied, a lighthearted discussion about edible monsters briefly lifted the mood. They shortly descended into a lengthy forgotten stairway in which warnings of lurking creatures raised mood. Cautiously moving deeper, the party stayed alert, opposing threats that was able to strike from short. Suspicion rose as the warriors sensed a disturbing aura from Nero's cooking, finding it untrustworthy. Regardless of concerns, Iris stayed steady and confident in Lloyd's skill to protect and support their cause. Abruptly, threat hit from over, prompting Lloyd to unleash a lightning spell and save Nero. As trouble unfolded, Iris tended to the wounded as everyone argued the edibility of strange monsters. To everyone's surprise, an enormous king beetle emerged, looming menacingly in the shrine corridor. With a swift and strong strike, Sephilia released a holy slash, cutting across the foe. Her display of precision left everyone shocked, revealing her past as a formidable holy warrior. As Lloyd retrieved a beetle leg, its sheer scale reminded them of the beast ruler tier rank. Suddenly, Sephilia failed from exhaustion, prompting worry as Lloyd realized she hadn't eaten. Nero stepped in to prepare the meal, suggesting spices and slicing to neutralize its overpowering scent. Following cooking, Nero happily presented the dish, and Sephilia devoured it with delight, praising the flavor. Lloyd and everyone were surprised by how delicious beetles was capable to be until urgent news interrupted them. Ager call came in. Elevated tier monsters were approaching, and the shield required activation immediately. As Lloyd's culinary skills raised curiosity, the looming threat dragged their focus again to reality. Abruptly, a minotaur stormed into view, prompting Iris and her companions to launch a swift defense with coordinated attacks. The party fired a strong assault that shattered the foe and the surrounding stone. Victorious, they walked ahead across the crumbling ruins, every carrying their own aim. Lloyd started to understand Iris's dedication to sorcery as she led them towards the cleansing chamber. Nero, ever skeptical, commented on Lloyd's idealism with mild disapproval. Iris yet hinted that their quest bore deeper burdens than he realized. Inside the grand chamber, Iris announced the begin of the cleansing ritual and asked for protection. Prior to the ritual was able to begin, a sudden blast interrupted them as Sephilia and Iris readied for battle. Lloyd discovered a dagger embedded in the floor just as enemies made a dramatic entrance. A masked figure explained herself, mocking them and declaring a bounty set on the scientists. Realizing the threat, Nero identified the intruder as an assassin sent from Roland targeting Iris. Lloyd fired a sorcery as the masked attacker charged, scattering debris across the chamber. To their surprise, the foe was rapidly beat, leaving the party momentarily stunned. Yet the victory was brief-lived. The real foe revealed multiple clones and struck Nero down, catching Lyra off guard as Lloyd and everyone struggled to hold the line. Towering over the field, a monstrous beast started tearing across the shrine walls. With terror gripping the crowd, soldiers knew the frightening force, an elevated-level land eater prompting urgent calls to protect the civilians. As Iris engaged the foe, allies raced to activate the protective shield prior to the creature broke through. Masked assassin called Black Crow confronted her mark with lethal precision. A tense standoff unfolded as Lloyd wondered the state of the shield and the foe's sudden appearance. Iris struggled to contain the spreading damage, as suspicion arose over the forbidden relic in her possession. Amid the panic, masked assassins argued amongst themselves, revealing distant greater than intended. The old staff of holy destruction, lengthy sealed aside, had resurfaced its strength once used in demon wars. With the Holy One absent, the foe's scheme succeeded. The shield weakened. Lloyd confronted Iris, eager to understand her careless deeds as threat closed in on all sides. Lacking warning, twin assassins fired a lethal ambush, targeting Iris with precision strikes. The attackers explained their ability, surrounding the party with swift and unyielding coordination. Realizing his limitations, Lloyd activated a protective shield, entrusting the fight to his allies. With a fierce charge, the attendant warrior released a strong holy sword, and Nero's slash met with immense blade pressure. The assassins paused. Sophilia charged, still fell victim to a strong illusion technique called future and past. Inside the hallucination, recollections of a silent instant and gifted pastries resurfaced as she sat alone by a wall. She whispered in awe, entranced by a taste she had not once known in her hardened existence. Inspired by her reaction, still her enemies grew emotional, realizing she had not once known comfort apart from battle until now. Encircled by delicious meal, Sophilia indulged, lacking restraint, her spirit's longing laid bare in the illusion. As the illusion deepened, the foe ridiculed their vulnerability, warning that anyone trapped in comfort might not once awaken. His own desires pulling him into the wish as he wondered what he really sought. Visions of harmony appeared. Sophilia pictured a next step where everyone could share warm meals without conflict. Still Iris succumbed, envisioning herself forgetting work for just single greater bite. Lloyd realized the assassins were targeting Iris, forcing him to seek dropping the shield and entering the fray himself. Within the illusion, twisted desires appeared. Nero commended Iris's beauty as urging her to eat more. Trouble burst as Nero fed endlessly, immense the assassins and breaking their calm under the illusion's strain. With the wish fading, Lloyd confronted the foe, declaring he required no illusions to win opposing them. Eager scheme-shaped, Lloyd commanded Nero to cook anew. Lloyd provided his materials, convincing Nero to cook regardless of the field chaos unfolding around them. Jointly, they readied Omuris mid-fight, astonishing everyone with their odds-still determined collaboration. As combat resumed, Sophilia fired a fierce counterattack, her renewed clarity shattering the illusion with one decisive strike. Their scheme succeeded. The rod of holy destruction was broken. With illusions dispelled, the shield started to close, and still the foe admitted defeat to Sophilia's overwhelming appetite. With doom looming, a pair of allies panicked in terror as the colossal beast readied to end it all. The shield completed, saving everyone and halting the monster's advance. Lloyd, currently steady, assessed the circumstance, noting the spread enemy and preparing for a counterattack. Yet a sinister twist appeared. Beat clones were being absorbed into a fresh, ominous threat. The foe merged their strength, unleashing an enraged charge, yet Lloyd countered with enhanced speed and sheer force. To confront the formidable foe, Lloyd released strengthening sorcery intended for only the highest-class monsters. The force of his strike sent shockwaves across the shrine, leaving the assassin shocked and in disbelief. Afterward, a warrior reached to arrest Iris, prompting Lloyd to question the motives short her bounty. Black Crow explained the reality. The Royal of Holy Roland sought to erase Iris for disrupting his ambitions. Iris silently confirmed her banishment, at last acknowledging the reality herself. Iris explained the prince's real intention to provoke a conflict opposing their nation, shocking everyone with the scale of the threat. She asked Lloyd to accompany her to the royal city in which Ruby awaited, in command to stop the invasion. As traveling by carriage, a noble questions Iris's claim that the royal seeks conflict. At court, Iris explains that royal geese frequently shove for military expansion to subdue neighboring lands. She recalls rejecting his stance, arguing it mirrored the demons who invaded 2 centuries earlier. As an outcome of her opposition, the royal labeled her a fraud and exiled her. Currently, she seeks to prevent invasion by forming an alliance with Melzaria's monarch. Lloyd struggles to compose himself as Iris watches calmly, sensing anything is mistaken. Their carriage arrives in the royal city of Melzaria, a city covered with ornate towers. Inside the court, nobles display their refined style to please the monarch's taste for beauty. The monarch welcomes Isolde, with praise for her work guarding the holy shrine. Prior to formality's conclusion, Iris steps ahead to deliver an urgent message to Her Majesty. News of Roland's aggression shocks the monarch, as nobles whisper about Iris's exile. Notice shifts to Lloyd, whose standing suffers due to his reduced resource collection rate. Regardless of harsh disbelief, Iris defends him, telling everyone that Lloyd beat the Black Crow. Her fury grows as she hears insults hurled at Lloyd, speaking the judgment unfair and harsh. Breaking the silence, the monarch denounces the crowd's behavior as utterly inelegant. The monarch challenges Lloyd, implying elegance lies in calmness, still once facing threat. Lloyd is brought prior to Dandelion, Melzeria's flamboyant and strange warrior commander. Ridiculed for his attire, Lloyd hesitates, as Dandelion demands proof of elegance in combat. As the fight begins, Isolde steps in to aid Lloyd, pushing him to regain focus. Elsewhere, Sephilia and her partner prepare to enter, intending to humiliate their opponent in style. Dandelion sees a starting, yet Sephilia and her partner fumble, distracted by meal talk. He unleashes a mighty move, Dandy Giga Bloom Flash, declaring the fight concluded. As the dust settles, Iris reaches for Lloyd, strained by how cruelly he was ridiculed. She reminds him of his past heroism and urges him to rise and look the challenge. Jointly, they charge ahead to confront the flashy warrior, resolved to turn the tide. As the noise beyond grows bolder, a resolved woman declares it's time for her battle. She shortly greets Crowley, the legendary sorcerer of the Magic Association. With major respect, Crowley humbly dismisses the attempt it took to journey, noting carriages make everything easier currently. Though living silently, Crowley remains the famed champion who once beat the Fiend King. Seeing an opportunity, the lady plots to win him over with homemade cookies and charm. Crowley calmly activates Protection's sorcery following an explosive cookie surprise, leaving the woman shocked. She defends her cooking, claiming the intention was a spicy flavor, not destruction. Regardless of the mishap, she hands over an appeal slip, thankful for his rapid readiness to help. Crowley reads the appeal aloud, an unusual phantom blossom from a risky, unexplored zone. With disbelief, he questions the unfeasible deadline she set by tomorrow. The lady assures Crowley she isn't sending him on foot, offering a teleportation circle rather. To her surprise, Crowley has not once seen a real single prior to and is amazed. Yet, he softly criticizes her for being too casual about vital matters beyond of alchemy. Elsewhere, Dandelion warns of the unexplored zone, claiming it was able to wipe out forces overnight. She laughs off the threat, incapable to believe the threat is really that severe. In the midst of fight, Lloyd effortlessly fulfills different appeal just as expected. Crowley listens in awe, realizing if it's every real, Lloyd may be apart from his tier. Both Lloyd and the lady exchange glances, shaken by the weight of that realization. Dandelion falls in defeat, and Crowley watches Lloyd in silence, shocked by his immense strength. Still, he offers support, believing she too was able to reach such success in time haunted by harsh remarks and loss. Both Lloyd and the lady awaken from troubled dreams. Fueled by annoyance, she lashes out, comparing everyone's failures to Lloyd's past achievements. Her fury escalates as she discredits heroes and mocks the sorcerer prior to her. Crowley's aura flares, his fury ignited by insults opposing those he once battled beside. With stern will, he demands that Lady Alchemia retract her disrespectful remarks. Crowley's energy surges, yet anything abruptly erupts between him and Alchemia. She screams in alarm, startled by the unforeseen blast, unfolding prior to her gaze. In an instant, Crowley collapses to the ground, knocked unconscious from the force. Realization strikes the cookie, combined with his fiery aura, triggered an arcane detonation. As guards rush in, Alchemia continues screaming, covered by the trouble she accidentally caused. In the holy realm of Roland, trouble brews as news spreads of Black Crow's defeat. Leaders express regret over misjudged alliances and question the consequences of their decisions. Elsewhere, Lloyd continues moving forward, unaware of the gathering storm. Lloyd stood awkwardly in festive clothing, unaware of the impression he made. A noblewoman, enjoying a lavish bath, respected his transformation, seeing him in a fresh glow. Afterward, prior to the royal court, Lloyd's contributions drew notice. His deeds, once questioned, currently earned recognition from the ruler and nobles. A strong lady told restraint, explaining that the earlier conflict was provoked by the Holy Roland Kingdom. She requested that the forces not be mobilized. In private, she reminded Lloyd that evading conflict spared innocent citizens from harm, a wiser, gentler route. Agreeing to a diplomatic approach, the court opted for trade sanctions. Though burdensome, it was an option that honored harmony. Prior to the throne, the monarch stressed that halting Prince Geese was essential. She reminded everyone present that Lloyd of every others ought to recognize the urgency. As thankful, he couldn't aid yet wonder if Iris had been silently burdened by thoughts of the prince. Their quest completed, Iris was entrusted to Lloyd's caution for the morning. The sudden responsibility caught him off guard. Tairuru advised them to explore as she headed to the Explorers Guild. With little hesitation, the pair vowed. As they walked, Iris asked about the royal. Lloyd, smiling, suggested they explore as talking, eager to ease the tension. Lloyd awkwardly realized his question about the royal hit a nerve. Iris, reflecting silently, acknowledged their ideals clashed, though the royal once sought harmony through desperate means. Elsewhere, a heated debate shattered out. One flank required control of foreign lands to prepare for a coming fiend invasion. Regardless of the intention to unite the realm, Iris condemned the scheme, knowing it might only lead to countless needless deaths. The argument intensified. The royal countered, claiming the Holy One's holy strength solo wasn't enough to prevent war. Again with Lloyd, Iris hid her pain short a grin. He was able to solely imagine the burdens she bore. Lloyd and Iris stumbled on an arcane traveling fair. The sight brought a new childhood recollections for Iris, who pointed excitedly at the roller coaster. They boarded the worm-shaped ride. As the cart rose ahead, Lloyd remembered holding to a real dragon during a fierce battle long ago. Amazed, Lloyd wondered how the coaster operated. Iris, somewhat doubtful, acknowledged latest incidents had dulled her sense of thrill. Their curiosity was answered once they spotted a muscular fellow powering the ride manually. Greatly to their surprise, the fellow dandelion lightly explained he did it as a workout, entertaining children as building strength. As Lloyd awkwardly got praise from children, Dandelion humbly insisted Lloyd's strength surpassed his own, lifting spirits and young ones with ease. Following enjoying the fair, Dandelion wished them a pleasant date and took his depart, prompting Lloyd and Iris to seek heading again. As the heavens dimmed, Iris unsealed up. She asked whether if harmony came, Lloyd wished for her to return to her saintly labor or seek happiness elsewhere. Reflecting on her past, she explained she had been chosen initial for holy training due to her arcane potential. She explained that wielding holy strength bore immense responsibility, the burden of protecting the nation's highly borders. Iris, puffing with pride, stated herself elite. Solely those mastering history, politics, and holy rites was able to become saints. Lloyd trusted her dedication. She softly acknowledged that her drive stemmed from a desire to defend everyone. Recollections of Roland covered her thoughts, her mother at the market, her father checking on her throughout school, her hard-working brothers, and the caring people she grew up with. Though her conflict with the royal worsened and led to banishment, she didn't waver. Faithful comrades stood by her flank, offering aid and believing in her cause. Iris confessed that returning to her position as a holy one might be difficult. What she really longed for was a silent existence with those she cherished. Beneath her strength, she acknowledged a simple reality: she dreaded being solo. Lloyd stood silently, inspired by her honesty. Regardless of his struggles, he saw how resilient Iris truly was. Resolved, she vowed to do anything to make him grin. Lloyd, covered, whispered his thanks as the moon hung silently over. Afterward, a heated welcome awaited them. Iris was greeted with honor and celebration for her labor in the royal city. Laughter echoed nearby the table as everyone told a grand food. Lloyd credited the delicious dishes to teamwork, regardless of joking from a hungry companion. With steady joy, Iris suggested they celebrate anew once harmony was secured. Lloyd grinned, hoping it might mark a real fresh beginning. They sealed the instant with a promise, their hands clasped beneath the heated glow of a peaceful evening. Elsewhere, Ruby rested in a jail cell. Rumors of her fall expanded. Desperation had led her to assault a sorcerer. Frustrated and enraged, she refused the accusations. Incapable to welcome the reality of her downfall, alarm overtook her. Frustration boiled as she wept out, incapable to understand why no single defended her. Regardless of claiming noble status, isolation wrapped tighter close her. Voices echoed from close cells. Some ridiculed her setback, everyone complained about meal. One tone wondered her identity, sensing anything familiar. She stood firm, unwilling to deny it. Pride rejected to let her shrink. Still, once someone called her the realm's top alchemist. An unforeseen gift followed. They wished her to accompany them to Roland, regardless of the circumstances. Alarm rose. The other prisoners bickered, debating her worth. As she stood shocked by their chaotic reasoning, doubt covered the cell as single prisoner rejected any offer of escape. Yet to everyone's surprise, different lightly picked the lock, proving otherwise. Concerns arose about the journey forward, yet rather than terror, the challenge solely ignited Ruby's determination. She proposed a solution: if someone was able to use sorcery, they was able to activate a teleportation circle hidden in her atelier. Feigning innocence, she resolved to tag along, planning to afterward shift every blame onto the party. Guards discovered the breakout too delayed outside. Single prisoner explained she was solely a clone as the real escape unfolded under moonlight. Lloyd, still wearing his apron, was interrupted mid-preparation as an urgent message summoned everyone to the reception room. Puzzled by the initial gathering, the party speculated as entering, greeted by an unusual silence and a tense atmosphere. A grim announcement followed. Someone of elevated standing in the royal city had nearly been assassinated. Poorer border troops had been assaulted, and the suspect reportedly escaped alongside the notorious Black Crow. Lacking warning, conflict burst. Roland's forces started their invasion of Melzeria, catching everyone off guard. Still, as breakfast stayed unfinished, the priestess stood prior to him, weighed by remorse. Her past deeds, intended to aid, had solely made things worse. Despite of warnings about the approaching forces, she resolved to return. If anyone was capable to stop the royal, it had to be her. She gave her farewell to those who had stood by her. Resolved, she made preparations to depart, leaving brief safety for duty. Single fellow remembered anything crucial. A teleportation circle hidden in the atelier was capable to give a safer route to Roland. Yet hesitation gripped him. Using that route intended confronting Ruby, someone he had wished not once to face again. Met with immense stress, Lloyd failed prior to he could speak Ruby's name. His companions watched helplessly as alarm overtook him. As he rested unconscious, those close him speculated about his unspoken thoughts. The terror that silenced him hinted at anything greatly troubling. Single woman, reflecting on her haste, realized her pressure may have driven him apart from his limits. Regret settled in her spirit. An unusual relic was presented, an elegant provide from the demons, renamed for formality. It possessed the strength to bridge minds. With it, an individual was able to enter different thoughts by sleeping close, opening a hidden path into Lloyd's guarded consciousness. Though the outcome was uncertain, Single woman volunteered, lacking hesitation, ready to use the mind-entering device. Prior to opening, she provided a silent apology and sat beside Lloyd. Everyone resolved to stay short, ready to intervene if anything went wrong. Lloyd awoke in an odd, towering chamber, confused. He gradually knew it as the atelier, yet anything felt off. Abruptly, Ruby appeared in monstrous form, berating him with fury. Lloyd realized he had unfinished business with her. Crushed by remorse and her remarks, he spiraled into self-blame. Doubt covered him as he apologized to Iris in his thoughts. With unwavering will, Iris stepped ahead, her tone cutting across the chaos as she called out to Lloyd. She stood firm, opposing the monstrous Ruby, defending Lloyd's value, lacking hesitation. Her declaration as his companion rocked the chamber. Refusing to welcome the harsh labels, she denounced Ruby's treatment of Lloyd. Her fury rose as she required his release. A sorcery burst forth, liquid dragon crashing into Ruby with force. Iris watched the impact, relief rising as her assault landed. Despite of the victory, she rapidly reassessed. In this imaginary realm, brute strength solo wouldn't be sufficient to win. Lloyd sank into despair, paralyzed by terror and doubt. Ruby's looming arrival left him questioning his value once greater. Regardless of support from companions, his terror lingered. Iris told him to depart her short, yet he refused to abandon her. As alarm rose, Iris's plea shattered across. She didn't want strength, she wished honesty. Every he had to do was ask for aid. Recollections of past struggles returned. He had constantly attempted to shoulder everything solo, yet now he realized the strength in trusting others. Nearing out with renewed will, Lloyd grasped Iris's palm, no longer solo, but supported, ready to stand together against the storm. Iris emerged prior to them as a towering figure, her newfound arrival immense. Lloyd and Ruby was capable to solely stare in awe and disbelief. With steady assurance, she contained Ruby effortlessly, sealing her inside ajar. Harmony settled over the dreamlike realm at Endure. As their minds returned to reality, Lloyd stirred beside Iris. Gratitude covered his thoughts. She had stood by him once he weakened. Rising from bed, he addressed the party. The teleportation circle in the atelier was able to currently be employed, lacking hesitation. Freed from the weight of Ruby's tone, Lloyd felt lighter, for the initial moment. He met ahead with confidence and clarity. Lloyd reached at Ruby's gate, seeking her aid. Yet, a guard barred him, declaring the area restricted to outsiders. Inside, turmoil had burst. News expanded that the house's owner was under investigation for tried murder, leaving everyone shocked. Regardless of the rising mood, Lloyd suggested postponing meeting. The party shifted focus, agreeing to use the close sorcery circle rather. He explained that the circle might transport them to his gathering site in Roland, an area vital to their following move. As they readied, concerns surfaced about facing the royal. Lloyd, yet, vowed answers following teleportation. His decision clear but unread. Prior to departure, Nero handed Lloyd a huge sack of snacks. telling him that provisions were just as vital as courage. Isolde, resolute in her duty, vowed to enter them. She had already ensured her responsibilities might be covered throughout her absence. Everyone, containing Sephilia and her companions, expressed a desire to come, yet ultimately selected to stay behind, not wanting to be a burden. Though concerned, Tairuru supported Iris's option. Her worry stayed, yet she set her trust in Iris's strength. The party collected one by single, they readied for teleportation. The sorcery circle glowing as their journey to Roland was set to begin. Lloyd gazed towards the snowy mountains, steeling himself for the meeting forward with Prince Geese. Elsewhere, two passengers struggled across the chilly, unaware of the danger. Soldiers abruptly identified one of them as the notorious Black Crow. Lacking warning, both were arrested and handcuffed. Confused and frightened, they got no reasoning, solely commands to remain silent. Surprise set in as single of them was informed she was already sentenced to death in different nation. A week following their capture, the woman stood firm as they at last arrived at the capital. Her gaze was sharp, hiding unease beneath steady. In the throne chamber, an agent in disguise reported the failed assassination, offering a fresh prisoner as compensation. Witnessing the odd theatrics, the woman wondered her choice to follow the agent, unsure whether trust had been misplaced. Within Roland Castle, officials reported progress on the conflict front, speaking assuredly as they approached the royal. The royal rested atop his throne, steady yet alert. The woman realized he was Roland's royal, the single currently judging her fate. Prior to a grand portrait of the fallen ruler, the royal vowed to fulfill his father's wish, uniting the continent and claiming the throne. With unwavering loyalty, Ezekiel pledged her aid. Their alliance was commended, as mood amid the others remained unspoken but clear. The royal acknowledged Ezekiel's patience, casting a subtle contrast between her and the impulsive Iris. Frustrations about Iris's careless deeds surfaced. One advisor aired grievances as different intent on stabilizing the nation. Though Ezekiel provided a steady arrival, Iris watched from the flank, hiding her thoughts behind laughter as old wounds lingered. A fresh report explained that Black Crow had been seized, though the assassination attempt on Iris had failed once greater. Displeased with their setback, the royal rejected them both as worthless. His harsh tone cut across the chamber. Chained and kneeling, the girls were handed a death sentence, lacking hesitation, their expressions frozen in disbelief. Iris resisted fiercely, cries her status and demanding release, yet her pleas echoed opposing unmoved guards. At that instant, Ezekiel intervened calmly, telling to spare their lives and requesting the correct to take responsibility for them released from their chains. The girls realized they had narrowly escaped execution, rescued solely by the Holy One's intervention. Elsewhere in the fortress, several odd figures drew notice with their odd appearances and odd questions. Every single presented themselves with a grim or shameful confession. Criminals, exiles, and heretics alike stood in that chamber. They discussed Ezekiel's past, revealing she hailed from a fallen realm and currently worked as Roland's appointed Holy One. Once Iris entered and saw the collected outcasts, she paused, uncertain of what next step awaited them. Every under Ezekiel's command. Ezekiel entered with a towering beast at her flank, stunning everyone with its immense arrival and strength. She calmly referred to the being as her pet and started distributing duties, brushing aside their terror. Her real aim surfaced. She sought alchemical resources and required labor from the collected group, referring to them as slaves. Single chemist protested, revealing the threat of the unexplored regions they were commanded to enter, accusing her of sentencing them to death. Lacking hesitation, the beast hit him down. Ezekiel watched coldly as the everyone stared in quiet horror. Ezekiel clarified with a chilling grin that their quest wasn't a command. It was their destiny. Her look twisted into anything monstrous as she stated total control over their lives, demanding absolute obedience. Under her threats, the party was shoved out, made to begin their lethal journey, lacking time to protest. Once beyond, the warning kept setback to complete the duty meant immediate execution. No exceptions. Ahead lay a forbidden zone untouched by holy protection. Iris wondered her decisions, realizing the threat was distant, worse than expected. Black Crow reflected on how the royal once favored Ezekiel for her gentleness. Still currently, she wielded strength cruelly and without remorse. The party realized resistance was hopeless. Still, if they disagreed, opposing her intended sure death, resolved to survive. The clown proposed unity. Working jointly, he believed, was their solely offer to endure the trial forward. Prior to any scheme was able to form, a monstrous three-headed beast abruptly attacked, breaking through the snow with terrifying force. Everyone stiffened in terror as the being lunged. Iris and the everyone was able to solely scream, caught off guard and defenseless. The party fled as the monstrous chihuahua-like beast chased them down. Iris shouted to take refuge in a close cave. Yet alarm turned to horror. What looked like a cave was actually a lurking being, a dark Alron waiting to strike. With no improved option, Black Crow began rapidly cloning herself. Iris, exasperated, required she contribute anything useful. Regardless of the attempt, the clones were devoured single following another. The beast kept chewing across them, undeterred by the decoys. Throughout the trouble, Iris fell, her leg wounded. She struggled to stand as the beast's jaws loomed dangerously close. The beast bared its fangs, growling as it closed in for the kill, gaze locked on its prey. Iris lay beneath it, frozen in terror. The sharp teeth over her reflected the hopelessness of her circumstance. Terror consumed her. Memories surfaced times once she was belittled and rejected, wondering currently if this was really her end. In that instant, she remembered Lloyd's regret and the remarks of someone who once believed in her potential. Crying welled in her gaze, screaming with desperation. She raised her blade, driving it upward into the beast's mouth as its jaws descended on her. Driven by desperation and pride, Iris screamed out her will. If Lloyd was able to gather resources, then so was able to she. With the beast at endure slain, Black Crow handed her a fang single of the exact items they had been sent to retrieve. Lying in the snow, Iris weakly chuckled and mumbled her solely wish to take a bath rest, yet distant aside. Elsewhere, Lloyd and everyone crossed the border safely. A fresh scheme had begun to take shape amid them. With a glowing item box in palm, Lloyd was asked about his plan to stop the royal. His answer had just begun. Lloyd boldly proposed placing the royal within the item box to capture and bring him again living, shocking everyone in the room. Regardless of doubts, he explained that the box was secure. He had still slept within it. Everyone struggled to grasp the odd scheme. As silence remained, single woman broke it with quiet approval. The odd notion just might succeed. Few was able to use item boxes, and none might imagine they was able to be employed for abduction, making it the perfect, unpredictable tactic. He grinned assuredly, declaring they'd use the royal as leverage for harmony talks with Melzaria. The scheme was currently in motion. With determination in her tone, the woman stated they might now lead the operation, reclaiming control of their homeland united. The party set off across the snowy terrain, unaware of the glowing gaze seeing from afar. Ezekiel, sensing their movement across sorcery, smirked coldly. She already saw them as pests needing to be crushed. An unusual arcane beast emerged prior to the party, its eerie form sparking questions. Standing silently, the lady took in her surroundings. Her gaze remained on the cathedral forward as she reflected on her return. An area once familiar. Over them rose the cathedral, enormous and imposing. Without delay, the party advanced towards its entrance, their steps echoing on the stone route profound inside the fortress. A sorceress got urgent news her summoned creature had fallen, and enemies were already inside. Wrath started in her gaze. As she shouted commands, refusing to tolerate defeat, she required the intruders be eliminated, lacking mercy. Lloyd readied a strong magic, offering to break across the defenses with an explosion. Tension rose as Lloyd insisted on moving ahead. Despite warnings from everyone, he stayed intent on defeating the guards blocking their route. Alarm hit Iris as she rebuked him. She reminded Lloyd that not everyone was made for elevated tier combat like Dandelion or Black Crow yet. With enhancements, the sorcery he wielded was dangerously lethal. A misplaced blast was able to quickly outcome in death, shocking Lloyd into hesitation. Rebuked further, he was told not once to cast if he couldn't control it. Alternative ideas like plant sorcery were brought up, yet stealth stayed a worry. His experience in remote resource gathering made his approach madly distinct from everyone. Cautioning the party, single member reminded everyone they weren't in that place to provoke a conflict. Stealth was the priority, not unsealed fight. Abruptly, one of them snuck off. Once discovered, she was already stuffing her arms with goods, causing a frantic outburst from her teammate. The party stumbled on a meal storage region. Regardless of a stockpile, they were shocked to hear that their provisions had already run out. Realizing the need for a safer route, they regrouped. Two leapt over the wall as everyone scouted a quieter route, in which security was thin. Within the cathedral, patrolling guards reminded every other to stay careful. Any careless deed was able to expose them. Lloyd's possession of the item box was crucial to the quest. Single teammate whispered about finding sorcery to aid them slip by undetected. Their disguise was rapidly tested. A robed official confronted them, questioning their sight and aim. The party stiffened under pressure. Thinking rapidly, they claimed to be responding to a library disturbance. Their bluff surprisingly worked, and the official gave to guide them. As talk shifted to rumors about the intruders, the party realized they required a convincing excuse to slip aside unnoticed. Rumors expanded amid the guards about two dreaded warriors: Isolde, known for her brute strength, and Sephiria, infamous for her recklessness. Within the fortress, officials whispered that these highly two had once driven the former Holy One to madness. Their names stirred unease. Lacking warning, sorcery rose, an enormous magic ice spear, fired enemies into the air, shaking the halls with its force. Elsewhere, Iris silently advanced. A subordinate noticed her odd demeanor yet paused to question her sudden will. Thou single warrior had already fallen. Iris stayed composed, confident. She believed the castle's maze of monsters might trap the intruders. A horde of arcane beasts was commanded to assault, driven by vengeance for their fallen brethren. Standing firm, single warrior stepped ahead, claiming responsibility for the monsters. Nearby him, the aftermath of a fierce fight lay in silence. Deeper within, the party discovered imprisoned association members. Recognition dawned as one called out to Isolde from short the bars. The captives explained they were taken as serving beside the border, treated as expendable. They were left to die in beast-infested zones. Trouble grew as citizens were ushered to safety, witnessing the royals' unforeseen deeds. Iris stared in disbelief at the unfolding circumstance. Beyond a heavy gate, voices confirmed others were trapped within. As the entrance was made unsealed, frightened citizens poured out, thankful for rescue. Within the structure, they discovered a frail youngster bound in chains. Her appearance stopped everyone chilly. Seeing her as a foreign sorcerer, the knights were horrified by the abuse. Though yet living, she was on the brink and required urgent caution. Crying welled in single warrior's gaze, regret tore across her. This ought to not once have happened under her watch. Lloyd realized the royals' deeds had gone too distant. If left unchecked, everyone might continue to suffer. Alarms rang out as the party was spotted. Soldiers and monsters rapidly encircled them, cutting off flee. Reacting swift, Isolde and her partner sprinted in a distinct direction, launching wind sorcery to draw enemy attention away from the others. As the diversion unfolded, Iris turned to Lloyd. Together, they readied to unleash a potent display of plant sorcery, opposing the royals' forces. At the cathedral's entrance, the sorcery started to take form. Magic rose beneath their hands, aiming to break across the last stronghold. Within, Iris met the royal, beat and humiliated. She provided a bitter regret Ezekiel had failed to stop them. Royal Geese stood assuredly prior to his elite unit, the Holy Flame Knights. With their unmatched strength, he believed no one was able to reach the cathedral. He boasted of an impenetrable formation and a bridge vulnerable to ranged defense, swearing no intruder might pass. Abruptly, trouble burst. Massive vines burst across the earth, immense the formation and lifting soldiers into the air. The cathedral itself grew entangled, vines encasing it from every flank. Shock and panic expanded amid the defenders. From within the trouble, Iris and Lloyd stepped forth. Steady and resolute, they required Royal Geese surrender. No single was able to save him currently. Royal Geese, startled by Iris's arrival, wondered her motives. He claimed their deeds were arrogant and misguided. Enraged, he accused them of weakening humanity and giving demons an edge. Iris stood firm, speaking his justification, a mere pretense. She stated their quest was to defend the others. For Iris, this was not rebellion, it was the duty of a real holy single. With unwavering will, she challenged him directly. If he sought to rule across force, he might have to defeat her initial. Accepting the challenge, Iris advanced steady and resolute. She vowed to bring him down herself. Lloyd stepped ahead, prepared to confront the royal. As the current Holy One, he readied to stop everything with his own strength. Inside the damaged cathedral, Iris and Lloyd confront the royal and his escorts. An enraged official demands a reasoning for Iris's allegiance to a suspicious sorcerer. A stern lady steps forward, identifying Iris as a fake and accusing her of betrayal. She reveals her intention to eliminate the imposter. With a smug look, the lady dismisses Lloyd's work, claiming he stands out too greatly and must be dealt with immediately. She launches Delta Stream, a damaging wind magic. Lloyd remains composed, analyzing the oncoming force. In response, he activates Force Shield. Elsewhere, the blast shakes the cathedral, startling those apart from. Over the city walls, the cathedral's upper structure begins to tilt dangerously as the vines anchoring it tear apart. Chunks of stone break aside from the collapsing spire, plummeting towards the earth and leaving witnesses in shock. A figure proclaims the immense strength of Ezekiel, convinced that still Lloyd won't be capable to counter the destruction. Distinct observer, shocked by the display, reluctantly admits the scale of the damage was impressive. Lloyd steps forward, unfazed, conjuring Cyclone to push again the threat and shield Iris from harm. The foe marvels at the clash, showing curiosity as Lloyd activates physical enhancement to meet the threat, skull on, taking advantage of an instant's distraction. Iris prepares a counterattack from short, her mark unaware of the threat overhead. Sorcery erupts as both sides release their spells. Fireball crashes opposing Ice Spear. Iris makes her decision direct across deed, Made into a corner, the opponent retaliates with a barrage of liquid bullet, declaring no other option remains. In response, Iris summons an enormous water dragon, immense her foe and turning the tide of fight. Following unleashing strong sorcery, Iris admits its toll, exhausted. She knows she won't be capable to cast it anew shortly. Her opponent lashes out in annoyance, accusing Iris of solely ever listening to Lloyd as ignoring his own tone and words. A flashback reveals Iris standing in a grand cathedral. A priest asks if she's ready to devote herself to divine service. With will, Iris pledges to defend the frail and bring justice. The priest commands her to purge the realm of wicked. Afterward, Iris is escorted across the church grounds. A lady named Tairuru welcomes her and offers to aid with daily needs. Iris is dazzled by her fresh surroundings, filled by the beauty and scale of the sanctuary, her joy shining across observers. Shocked by her casual demeanor, whisper doubts about her identity, wondering if this cheerful woman is really the nation's holy one. Afterward, her compassion shows as she shares her desire for everyone to enjoy a meal like her mother once made, bringing warmth to those nearby her. An enraged outburst accuses Iris of ignorance, mocking her envy for her mother and speaking her a naïve youngster. The outcry deepens. Despite doing nothing unique, she was respected, and that, greater than anything, fuels resentment from those who feel overlooked. Lloyd pieces jointly Nero's motives as trouble erupts short him. A sudden strike from an enraged foe interrupts the instant. Blinded by resentment, the attacker lashes out, speaking Iris ignorant. She dismisses his remarks, declaring his tale irrelevant currently. In the ruins of a shrine, Iris reflects on a past quest. She hadn't realized the threat of weakened holy strength until it was too delayed. A warrior, humbled, thanks Iris for saving the area. She humbly defers, saying it was merely section of her duty. Lacking pause, the warrior rushes off, prepared to defend the next sacred site, all made possible by Iris's quiet support. Amid fight, an enraged foe denounces Iris, accusing her of lacking the awareness expected of a holy one. In a quieter instant, he reveals his motive: demons took his father, and he seeks to unite lands for protection across expansion. Iris challenges his scheme, questioning his decision to annex everyone. She warns that such deeds will divide humanity, mirroring the demon's cruelty. The royal explodes in fury, cries that Iris knows nothing of national burdens. Her opposition strikes at his pride and duty. Driven by wrath, he unleashes an assault, speaking her arrogant and dismissing her as a self-righteous youngster unfit to judge him. Iris collapses following the assault, her allies rushing to her flank. The royal hesitates, remorse flickering across his look as he processes the aftermath. Despite of the pain, Iris speaks up. She insists her perspective is shaped by simple roots, not strength, still experience and instinct. Tensions rise as she accuses him of pushing her aside. The royal, hit by realization, admits fault for everything that happened. With renewed will, Iris casts Water Dragon, cries her real aim. She returned not to fight, but to stop him. The sorcery engulfs him mid-retreat. From beneath, Lloyd and everyone watch as the enormous force lifts the royal into the air. With energy surging across him, Lloyd activates super-physical enhancement and strikes ahead, leaping to intercept the threat and defend everyone beneath. The fight ends with triumph. Holding a secured relic chest, Lloyd celebrates, shocked and calm that his attempt paid off. From across the debris, he calls to Iris. She looks up, surprised, their gaze meeting across the ruined battleground. As they reunite, she asks if he's all right. Lloyd smiles awkwardly, admitting the incidents caught him off guard. Still he is okay. Embarrassed, Iris hides her look, apologizing for her emotional outburst. Lloyd is left quiet as she flusters over being seen. So vulnerable, Lloyd offers a grin, admitting he frequently acts foolish. His remarks softly disarm Iris, who looks on, shocked and quiet. He confesses that seeing her imperfections comforts him. For once, Iris realizes she doesn't have to bear the weight of excellence solo. Elsewhere, fresh passengers return from the snowy mountains. One of them manages to gather unusual resources, yet worry lingers in her eyes. A growing unease spreads. One woman voices a poor feeling about the collected resources, sensing anything unnatural in their presence. Their terror is confirmed as an enormous, grotesque being emerges. The towering beast roars, casting an influence over the shocked party. The party faces the monstrous threat in alarm. With no scheme and no weapons mighty sufficient, they're frozen by terror and confusion. As the beasts march ahead, a fresh worry arises. Are these creatures heading straight for Roland, the royal city? A merciless lady towered over her fallen opponent, declaring her too frail to continue. Clutching her wounded flank, the beat sorcerer gritted her teeth. She had plainly misjudged Lloyd's strength and tactics. Winning in her current state was unfeasible. Distant from the fight, Lloyd inspected the aftermath with calm, The item box had burst from overuse, as the liquid worm's defeat signaled just how distant things had escalated. Contingency plans were already in motion as summoned monsters emerged. Realizing the threat, she made an eager choice to retreat. What really rocked her yet was the sight of a partner injured. Still, one of her strongest had fallen from over, a fierce figure descended like a meteor. Her arrival was commanding, and her demand was direct. She wished the wounded girl. Her tone turned chilly as she rejected the royal as useless. The woman yet gripped significant worth. She issued an ultimatum. Lloyd stood shocked by the appeal. His partner rejected, lacking hesitation, unwilling to surrender a vulnerable youngster. Annoyance boiled over. Gripping her horn, the lady cursed the circumstance. With no other option, she readied to unleash hidden strength. A transformation began. Sorcery rose as horns grew. The air thickened with threat, her transformation complete. The lady currently stood as a fearsome fiend. Every trace of restraint vanished. She had made her option. The onlookers reeled in disbelief. None was capable to reconcile her monstrous form with the saintly image they once believed in. Still, the royal looked shaken. Lacking warning, she fired herself skyward, then crashed down with destructive force. The earth shattered, sending shockwaves across the region. Raising her clawed palm, she stated her decision. No single might depart living. Her wrath was absolute. In response, an enormous blast magic ignited an eager effort to stop her rampage. A deafening blast burst over the city, shaking the skies and tearing across the clouds with blinding force. Debris expanded in every direction. Lloyd shielded his allies, rod in palm, bracing opposing the violent blast. The surprise didn't conclusion in that place. A companion exclaimed in disbelief. Her sorcery rivaled Lloyd's. He stood shocked, realizing the scale of her strength. Hovering over them, the fiend lady radiated immense strength. Her dominance was undeniable. She charged again. From the air, she crashed into the ground with brutal force. The field cracked under the weight of their escalating clash. The clash kept with damaging force. She lunged anew, tearing across walls and shaking the whole field. Destruction expanded, lacking pause. Currently standing apart, the two met off with mutual recognition. Even the bystanders was able to tell these two were fighting on a fully distinct tier. Curious, she wondered Lloyd's strength. For someone mortal, his abilities were distant apart from usual. He merely replied that he collected resources. Skepticism turned to curiosity. He spoke of unusual materials discovered solely in remote regions, as if it explained everything. Her look softened. She acknowledged with a grin she had been training in that place, every along surprised by her background. Everyone wondered why she had practiced in such a perilous area. She grinned, recalling someone else who had done the identical. A flashback explained her real allegiance, the initial subordinate of the Demon Lord. Her philosophy was direct, raw strength had to triumph over courage. Seasons earlier, she had been commanded to train in the lethal white sand dunes for 1,000 seasons. Despite protests, her weak point left no chamber for refusal. Terrified by the threat, she protested. Yet her greater silenced her. This wasn't an option, it was destiny. Reflecting on her ordeal, she remembered surviving hardly every morning. The identical hell that nearly shattered her had additionally shaped Lloyd over instant. Her hatred for the Fiend Lord festered. Made to survive by consuming monsters, her sole idea was revenge for her suffering. Despite of her loyalty, the reward for her endurance was vacant. The Demon Lord provided her an area on the front lines, yet her spirit had long turned cold. Once the champion weakened her greater, she took the opportunity to strike from short, seizing the chance to capture her. Contrary to mortal belief, the fallen figure wasn't a waiting holy one, she was the Demon Lord's influence. She had lived amid humans, impersonated the scientists, and plotted her return from within. A question was raised: why take on the position of the Fiend Lord? Her answer was swift destruction was merely a fiend's duty. With fury in her tone, she stated her decision to surpass the Demon Lord herself. Vengeance might be her route to strength. Her plan depended not on strength solo, yet cunning. Across manipulation and control, she vowed to erase her mentor's legacy fully, yet Lloyd called her out. Deceiving the royal and harming innocents for revenge was a harsh route. Employing Ruby for selfish gain crossed the line. That he was capable to not once forgive. Ezekiel expressed disappointment. She had wished Lloyd might understand her reasons, yet plainly he never did. With a heavy breath, she acknowledged defeat. Her cautiously laid plans had failed. Lloyd had thrown everything into disarray. Though worn and weakened, she wasn't completed. If harmony couldn't be arrived at, then strength might decide the outcome. A fresh declaration followed. She might carry her ambitions to the following realm. Her goals stayed unchanged. Yet initial, she vowed single last act of destruction. Everyone standing prior to her might be buried prior to she inspired on. An eerie transformation had consumed the Roland area, currently dominated by monstrous vegetation and towering beasts. Threat loomed closer. Pressing urgency on the party, reaching house felt unthinkable. Amid the trouble, especially under the unblinking gaze of a shadowy predator seeing from afar. With a deafening cry, an enormous owl like being lunged. Instinctively, they recoiled, narrowly dodging as terror rose across their bodies. Hoping for a counterattack, Single pleaded for sorcery aid, yet Lloyd shook his head. Victory opposing Single Beast might be meaningless with everyone waiting to strike. Resigned to the inevitable, they made their retreat. Materials in palm were abandoned as survival took priority over any quest aim. A solemn pact was made as swords and staves were raised elevated. Each warrior pledged to look the coming fight with unwavering will. Lloyd stepped forward, confronting the colossal beast lacking flinching. Determination hardened his gaze. Protecting the woman short him grew his solely focus as he stood against the enemy's demand. Elevated over, the Fiend Lord issued her command. Her assurance grew as she commanded her minions to strike down the lone obstacle prior to them. A hexagonal shield began to existence. The Fiend Lord taunted with her strength to regenerate endlessly, confident that no resistance was able to endure. Twin worm-like beasts released a destructive barrage. Their breath hit with explosive force, engulfing the close structure in flame and smoke. From a distance, the cathedral came into view, partially ruined. Observers noted the collapse of its defenses, acknowledging Lloyd's inexperience in such harsh terrain. Surprise expanded across the Fiend Lord's look. An odd formation started taking shape in the sky short her as the fight's momentum shifted. Lacking warning, a chain of arcane detonations burst across the field. 16 precise explosions hammered down, shaking both ground and foe alike. As Lloyd's strength defied demands, the Fiend Lord mocked the idea of shielding an entire cathedral with mere mortal training. A sudden warning rang out, still Lloyd was already in motion. Two monstrous beasts crashed across the earth, forcing him to activate his shield just in moment. The skirmish intensified as a partner intervened, casting a magic to drive Single of the creatures again. In the aftermath, Lloyd acknowledged the aid with gratitude. Mocking laughter echoed as the Fiend Lord released different wave of threats. As Lloyd flew into deed, recollections of past failure resurfaced. The Fiend Lord's taunts dug profound, telling him of bitter seconds in the sand dunes. From the gloom ahead, grotesque monstrosities loomed alone and encircled. Lloyd stood firm as unnatural horrors shut in. Prepared to strike. An enormous blast tore across the city skies, its scale leaving onlookers shocked. Fear rose as citizens wondered what carrying of foe Lloyd was up against. Elsewhere, giant owl-like beasts stormed across the streets. Ezekiel summoned familiars, rampaged unchecked, scattering defenders in alarm. The trouble intensified as an enormous being crashed into the field. Towering over the ruins, it radiated raw menace. From over, a warrior descended in a blur of speed. A blinding slash hit the beast as the technique Flashblade cut profound into its flank. Regardless of the forceful assault, the being's defenses gripped. Sorcery resistance started, and the warriors realized they were facing a really formidable opponent. With synchronized motion, the duo fired into their technique Double Fang Blade. Their blades aimed real as they charged jointly, prepared to display their hidden training. Mid-assault, Sephilia abruptly bit Isolde. The sudden snack halted their formation, leaving both off balance and shocked. Falling into trouble, Isolde gave her annoyance. The coordinated strike failed as a monstrous threat loomed close, roaring across the field. In the aftermath, a talk burst. Sephilia sheepishly acknowledged she was distracted by the scent of sweets. Regardless of everyone's disbelief and worry, resolved to restore focus, Isolde made a promise. Once the fight completed, she'd bake a huge cake as motivation and as a truce. With Lloyd weakened, they released their strongest move Double Fang Blade technique Raikage combo slicing across the monstrous swarm as trouble burst nearby them. Isolde rallied others to arms, her commanding tone cut across alarm, pushing holy knights to take up their weapons and fight back. One of her monsters had fallen, and Lloyd knew the signature teamwork of Isolde and Sephilia. As arcane barriers flickered, worry crept in. A lone warrior met immense odds, and allies was able to solely watch, frustrated at their own limitations. Still opposing every odds, a piercing strike landed, the beast fell immediately, and the shocked woman stood victorious, her courage shining brighter than any spell. Just as the fight intensified, an unforeseen partner reached bizarre in form. Yet full of confidence, the odd arrival darted forward, yet rapidly yelped in pain, flames licking its body. Its distraction gave enemies a momentary advantage, leaving everyone puzzled. From within the singed form, Lyra and Mars tumbled out, revealing they'd stowed aside in Lloyd's item box. As they explained, The pair had escaped the earlier disaster throughout the panic. Others, too, had hardly endured the trouble and currently sought to reunite. Greater unforeseen allies charged into fight. One bellowed a fierce conflict cry, prepared to try a fresh ability, proving they weren't the only ones eager to help. Reinforcements from the Explorers Association accompanied the fray. Though the Fiend Lord scoffed at their numbers, their arrival reignited faith amid the defenders. Isolde and Sephilia hit again with synchronized precision. Their Raikage combo tore across foe ranks, forcing still-seasoned foes to take them seriously. As the fight escalated, commands rang out. Lloyd called for a coordinated assault as everyone inspired to delay Ezekiel. The tide was shifting on opposite flanks, spells and swordplay clashed. Ice Spear flew alongside twin blade strikes, pressuring the foe's defenses from every direction. Lloyd closed in, unleashing double silence sorcery. His sudden strike silenced the Fiend Lord's incantation, catching her fully off guard. He stated he was no longer the isolated sorcerer wandering the dunes currently. He had allies at his flank in unison. His companions rose forward, each single bruised yet unyielding, battled with told resolve together. They met the Fiend Lord lacking hesitation. With every strength intent, Lloyd released a devastating blast. The blast carved the air with radiant force, hammering down on his mark. As the dust cleared, the foe staggered. Lloyd's magic had landed real, earning an unusual instant of triumph amidst the destruction. Encircled by fallen minions and mounting losses, the Fiend Lord weakened. Doubt clouded her thoughts. Retreat was unthinkable. Still defeat was looming. The Fiend Lord stood frozen, haunted by echoes of a past calamity. The monstrous arrival prior to her mirrored a disaster she had witnessed lengthy ago snap from her thoughts. By a sharp tone she turned, visibly shaken. The illusion of control was crumbling. Close. Allies struggled to regain. Bruce still breathing. They gradually regained awareness, searching for signs of Lloyd. Once Lloyd emerged, his gaze met Ruby's twisted grin. The reunion came under grim circumstances, shrouded in dread. Lloyd abruptly encountered Ruby in front of an enormous structure. Her look twisted in disbelief at his sudden appearance. Ruby confronted him about his disappearance. Her fury grew as she remembered how he left lacking notice, abandoning their told labor at the atelier. She vented her annoyance, recalling how her existence had become chaotic ever because he walked aside. Lloyd stood shocked by her outburst. Abruptly, Ruby was fired across the air by a strong force. A towering elven calmly commended her for retrieving unusual resources. The elven stood firm, wielding a glowing pot and a relic. An odd ritual had begun, and the atmosphere shifted with tension. She explained her decision to repurpose it for Journey, though its strength was clearly destructive. Energy rose as she activated the device, employing the bodies of fallen monsters. Everyone grew alarmed, preparing to intervene prior to it was too delayed. With a twisted grin, she set the crown on her skull. The alchemy item designed for dimensional transport pulsed with unstable sorcery. The party fired a combined blade technique to disrupt the ritual. Blades clashed with violent force, opposing the expanding energy wave. As the dust settled, the field lay in ruin. Lloyd and everyone searched desperately for Ezekiel, yet her arrival had vanished fully. An enormous sorcery circle appeared on the earth, radiating intense energy. The structure beneath began to fracture under the force. Witnessing the phenomenon, Lloyd told everyone to flee. At the identical moment, everyone noticed the sudden disappearance of arcane creatures. He rapidly identified the circle as a teleportation device, carefully resembling single they had previously employed at the atelier. Distinct party spotted a signal in the distance. They realized that Ezekiel had successfully escaped across the arcane transfer. Distant aside, an ominous tremor rocked the landscape. A dim root-covered fortress began to rise beneath a mountain's trembling surface. Lloyd explained that the mana from the vanished monsters had been absorbed into an enormous convergence. The arcane surge distorted the surroundings. A monstrous form emerged, revealing itself as Ezekiel fused with the beasts. The grotesque entity roared with immense strength, stunning everyone. She condemned Lloyd for aligning with humans, faulting him for her capture and transformation. Ignoring his remarks, Ezekiel lashed out in fury. Her appearance, currently warped and frightening, amplified her hatred and despair. Declaring her form an arm of vengeance, she vowed to destroy the command that once restrained her, shifting her wrath towards Lloyd's will. Lloyd conjured a force shield, bracing opposing Ezekiel's monstrous assault. Her tone thundered with blame, demanding his disappearance. The shield began to crack under the immense pressure. Magic clashed, opposing trouble, shattering the earth between them. Observers grew alarmed as the shield showed signs of breaking. Lloyd's look tightened, sensing the strain pushing him to his limits. Acknowledging the strength gap, he acknowledged he couldn't overcome her with sorcery solo. His tone gripped both regret and urgency. As the shield began to collapse, a partner emerged beside him. Jointly, they met Ezekiel, preparing for a decisive stand. Ezekiel rejected Iris's holy sorcery as frail, mocking her dedication regardless of her saintly training. The tension amid the defenders grew. Lloyd and his allies realized the holy sorcery might not affect Ezekiel directly, yet it was able to weaken the fused monsters inside her. Learning the shrine was apart from the remote mountains, single member stepped forward, confident in her ability to reach it with haste. He turned to the party with urgency, requesting 5 seconds. He required instant to release the shield and prepare a counterattack. With determination, Iris and the everyone received the duty. They ready to hold the line, giving Lloyd the critical seconds he asked for. Lightning crackled as one warrior charged across the smoke. Her form rose ahead, risking everything in a daring surprise assault, with swords drawn. She hit Ezekiel's skull on. The impact was fierce, forcing the beast to flinch and react defensively. In retaliation, Ezekiel seized a partner and hurled them skyward. Her tone vowed to incinerate every single of Lloyd's companions. Hovering midair, the lady shouted for Lloyd to act. Gripping his rod, he gave silent thanks and readied the counterattack. Nature responded to his sorcery. Vines burst from the ground, binding Ezekiel in a flurry of arcane roots and restraint. A towering structure shot across the heavens like a divine projectile. Roland's holy shrine hurtled straight towards Ezekiel's form. Observers gasped in disbelief. Lloyd had weaponized the whole shrine, stunning allies and enemies alike with the sheer scale of the assault. Empowered by a physical enhancement sorcery, Lloyd bore Iris in his arms. They braced jointly for their endure push. Leaping ahead with precision, he shut in on the restrained foe. Ezekiel, pinned by holy force, had no chamber to evade. Lloyd and Iris plunged into the shrine's core. Its old sorcery responded to their arrival, starting a path to the heart of the spell. Within the ruined shrine, Lloyd led Iris to the holy circle. With steady will, she stepped ahead, ready to begin the ritual. Jointly, they made their stand. Iris started chanting as Lloyd stood guard beside her, prepared to bring the last conflict to a close. A radiant burst of glow engulfed the chamber. The holy strength rose outward from Iris, shaking the whole shrine with its force. Ezekiel's form began to destabilize. The fused monsters within her writhed in pain as their strength drained aside. As Ezekiel let out an enraged growl, those seeing from beyond the temple realized the tide had finally begun to turn. Lloyd raised his rod as divine energy rose short him. The arcane blast collided with Ezekiel, tearing across the corrupted form. With unwavering focus, he gripped his position. The instant was critical. He couldn't afford to hesitate. An explosive burst of glow burst across the field. The ritual circle overcompleted its cast, engulfing Ezekiel in searing holy strength. Fragments of her monstrous form disintegrated midair. The fusion unraveled, leaving onlookers in disbelief at the immense force. As the dust settled, Lloyd stood beside Iris at the crater's edge. With a faint grin, he acknowledged how close the outcome had been. Iris abruptly embraced him. Her unforeseen deed left him shocked and blushing. Crying covered her gaze as she praised him for standing by her side and protecting both her and her people through the chaos. Lloyd grinned gently in response. Behind him, the damaged shrine stood tall as a silent reminder of what they'd overcome, jointly distant from their view. Ezekiel clawed her method across the rubble. Though beat, her will stayed unbroken. Clutching a shard of strength, she vowed to rise again. With a scheme to use the remaining monsters, she whispered a fresh threat. Ruby stepped forward with determination. Ezekiel, weakened and cornered, stared up. An endure meeting between the two was inevitable. Ruby confronts a familiar look buried in the sand, a former slave beat by Lloyd. The opponent reveals the crown's frightening skill to fuse with monsters, warning that still currently she holds enough power to destroy Ruby instantly. Observing from the flank, different character finds the notion clever and unforeseen. Ruby acknowledges the creativity with a mix of curiosity and caution. Laughter erupts throughout the scuffle over an alchemy pot. The foe dismisses any resistance, claiming her tools are useless, opposing humans rather than retreat. Ruby steps forward. She remembers every detail of the earlier process and prepares to replicate it on her own. Kneeling over the alchemy pot, Ruby adjusted the remaining resources with swift precision. Her gaze sharpened with choice. Lifting the demonic crown, she repurposed the provide with a firm grip. Shock expanded across her foe's look as the implications sank in. Rather than hesitate, Ruby proclaimed her identity as the royal city's brilliant chemist. She stated her decision to push the limits of what humans was able to use. A sudden blast of energy rose upward, blinding onlookers. The spectacle left remote witnesses quiet. From a close hill, Lloyd rushed forward, surveying the devastation. He called out to check on everyone's safety. Following the blast, Lloyd tended to the wounded as everyone provided healing magic. Praise was told, yet his thoughts stayed elsewhere. A heavy feeling settled over him. Despite the momentary steady, he sensed anything was yet mistaken and prepared to search for Ruby. Gloom started to form over the ruined spire, coalescing into a massive, ominous shape with glowing eyes. The ground shook. Fear expanded as a frightening wave of arcane energy rose forth. Someone shouted Ezekiel's identity in alarm. From the storm of trouble appeared a monstrous figure, its twisted look screaming Lloyd's identity, demanding he show himself. Lloyd stiffened as he saw Ruby's monstrous transformation. Her features were warped apart from recognition, striking terror still amid allies. An enraged threat echoed across the realm. Ruby vowed to destroy the whole nation if Lloyd rejected to look her. In the distance, a height range was torn apart by her blast. Witnesses was able to solely stare in disbelief at the immense force. Resolved to conclusion the trouble, Lloyd stepped ahead. Ruby's twisted grin widened as she stated her revenge might begin with him. He called out to her demanding answers, yet she solely looked down on him with harsh amusement. Ruby stated her decision to break Lloyd's spirit, imagining him begging to not once depart her again. Others wondered if becoming a beast was needed for that. Single of Lloyd's allies defended him, citing his position in saving the nation. Ruby rejected the praise with disgust, unwilling to hear cause. She lashed out, claiming Lloyd not once understood her. Attempts to encourage communication were rejected with bitter tantrums. Lloyd battled again, insisting he knew her improved than anyone. Their told past at the orphanage strengthened his will. To her, Lloyd was just a foolish sorcerer hardly value saving. Everyone at last saw her real self. Single of Ruby's companions acknowledged her disgust, admitting that still she once saw Lloyd as unstable and risky. Moment, yet, had shifted her perspective. A silent realization passed across Lloyd as he heard her remarks. Experience had shaped him. Through many trials he grew into a capable and believed explorer. Everyone chimed in, recalling his past victories and unselfish deeds. Still his cooking earned a grin from those nearby him. Seeing from the flank, different woman reflected on Ruby's descent. Despite her monstrous strength, she seemed greater pitiful than frightening. Ruby screamed in annoyance, unwilling to believe that someone like Lloyd was able to really improve. Her wrath masked anything greatly sorrowful. Wild insults burst from her. She ridiculed those defending him, speaking them blind fools taken in by lies. In silence, Lloyd processed the outburst. For an instant, he wondered if their connection had ever been real. She accused him of acting out a childish game, dismissing his friendships as meaningless and fake. Lacking different remark, Lloyd charged ahead. A one explosive punch silenced her fury and rocked the field. A damaging strike hurled Ruby across the field. Explosions rocked the earth as dust and debris burst into the heavens. Encircled by the aftermath, Lloyd stood silently. A storm swirled nearby him as he reflected on the harsh remarks he had endured. Raising his tone, he stated his pain and his pride. No single might be permitted to mock the bonds he had shaped. Those seeing was capable to hardly believe it. For the initial moment they saw his fury released, pure and unshaken. Ruby stared again, her monstrous look twisted not just in wrath, yet in disbelief. She shook yet stood her earth. Despite everything, she selected to resist him with every her strength, incapable to accept his change. Lloyd clenched his fists, surrounded by mood and will. He readied to conclusion the clash without hesitation. The earth split, unsealed as a monstrous being lunged ahead, its gaping mouth snapping wildly. Ruby and Lloyd were hurled into the air by the force of the assault. Standing his ground, Lloyd glared forward with defiance. Bloodied yet unwavering, he braced himself to retaliate, opposing the trouble. Elsewhere, a young lady frowned at her food. Regardless of its warmth, the pot au feu solely deepened her displeasure. In a silent room, Catherine presented herself, earning praise as both a daughter and a devoted disciple. Applause echoed across the chamber as townsfolk expressed their gratitude, honoring Catherine's work in silence and smiles. Ruby rested in silence, masking her bitterness as everyone chuckled and told their meals within. Resentment festered at being treated as lesser. Training sessions kept under harsh commands while everyone followed out of duty. Lloyd responded with sincere attempt, gaining unforeseen praise. Rumors expanded rapidly he had been practicing non-stop day following morning. He met the identical boulder, determined to master his spell. From the shadows, Ruby observed his issue. The duty seemed unfeasible, still, his will never wavered. Still, as the seasons passed, Lloyd pressed on under moonlight, unwavering in his search of acceptance and strength. Lloyd stepped forward, sensing the rising pressure from his sorcery. Hidden close, Ruby watched carefully, gaze fixed on his movements. A surge of liquid exploded from his sorcery, crashing with force. Ruby stiffened, shocked by the sheer strength he had at last achieved. News of his triumph expanded rapidly. Lloyd's dedication had bore off, earning praise and the correct to enter the Mages Guild. Driven by envy and ambition, Ruby research delayed into the evening. She resolved to become the greatest chemist and asked Lloyd to assist her. With a firm gesture, she stated their partnership. Lloyd, surprised, silently received as a fresh connection began to form. In the middle of fight, Ruby charged forward, her punch delivering with complete force. Lloyd followed close short, prepared to aid. Amid the trouble, Lloyd shouted again recollections of hardship, recalling how Ruby once manipulated him into risky tasks. The being ridiculed Lloyd's motives, dismissing his attempts to reconnect. Regardless of the insults, he pressed on unfazed by the ridicule. Afterward, the two reached at their fresh house. It was little and worn. Yet to them, it was freedom, an area of their own. As Ruby researched paperwork, Lloyd respected their hideout, already feeling at ease regardless of her annoyed glare. Following passing her chemist exam, Ruby happily explained their first official quest. Lloyd, eager and nervous, vowed to give it his every energy, turned to mood once Ruby's potion was refused. She insisted it was valid. Still, doubts started to rise. A merchant ridiculed her attempt, pointing out a small flaw. Ruby snapped, still the exchange left her shaken. Afterward, Lloyd apologized for not meeting demands. Ruby, emotional, brushed it off and refused his remorse. Resolved, she vowed to surpass those who ridiculed them. Lloyd silently promised, inspired by her flame and unwavering resolve. Ruby and Lloyd ran flank by flank across the silent streets, vowing to challenge the elite and never accept defeat. As instant passed, Ruby rose in status, earning the status of Lady Alchemia. Her pride swelled alongside growing others' envy. Single morning, a young lady named Catherine approached to give praise. Ruby got the praise with practiced grace. Confident in her growing standing, she believed she had secured her region. The praise solely fueled her ambition. No longer viewing herself as frail, Ruby stated her fresh identity, single that demanded respect from those who once dismissed her. Ruby burst into the chamber, excited to share her latest praise from a noble chemist. Her pride covered every remark. Elsewhere, Lloyd stirred a familiar pot. The scent of pot au feu brought again recollections from their orphanage periods. Watched silently, surprised by the emotions tied to anything so simple, the taste of house hit harder than expected. Regardless of past work, to forget that existence. Lloyd grinned and offered her a bowl, hopeful to reconnect through the shared past. Yet Ruby burst in annoyance, cries her long-held hatred for the dish. Lloyd stood shocked, uncertain how to respond. Annoyance exploded between them. Lloyd defended his recollections as Ruby lashed out, dismissing their told past. Fury escalated as accusations flew. Seasons of misunderstanding and silence currently boiled over into harsh remarks. Iris rushed into the fray, pleading for them to stop. Seeing the threat, everyone stepped ahead in alarm, speaking with steady strength. Iris reminded Ruby of the bonds they'd made. Comradeship, not conflict, had defined their journey. With unwavering gaze, she wondered Ruby's route, challenging her to imagine a next step shaped by unity, not bitterness, following everything. Neither of them spoke. Worn and bruised, they stood in silence, emotions lingering between them. Regardless of exhaustion, Lloyd shoved ahead. Together, they worked across the evening to glow the royal city, driven by an ambitious vision. Ruby refused his worry. Though visibly strained, she stayed intent, fueled by a need to see it across. They paused to think. Their lives had begun in hardship, no family, no wealth, an endless judgment from over. Facing the rising sun, Ruby acknowledged the reality they had began with nothing. Still, they still had each other and their dream. She expanded her arms wide, imagining a city lit by their work. The following step, she believed, might be theirs to claim across the field. Lloyd looked at her, torn between awe and disbelief. She had charged ahead, lacking hesitation. Mocking remarks spilled from her mouth, former ways surfacing in the heat of mood. Her gaze narrowed with sharp choice. Still, her fury cracked once Lloyd shoved back. His stubbornness had constantly provoked anything deeper in her. Lacking warning, an enormous blast hit. Ruby staggered, hardly capable to hold her earth as the dust rose nearby her. Ruby flew over the shattered cliffs as smoke rose beneath. Lloyd stood yet, realizing their conflict had arrived at its breaking point. Within the fractured room, conspirators calmly resolved the royals' fate. With a steady tone, the ruler entrusted Iris, Lloyd, and their allies with the realm's next step. Haunted by regret, the royal acknowledged his errors. Manipulated by demonic forces, he knew the lives that was able to have been deep, lacking his allies' intervention. Taking responsibility, he stood prior to Iris, admitting his setback to trust. The breach had permitted Ezekiel's manipulation, and currently he provided a sincere apology. He marveled at the Holy One's willingness to forgive, knowing few was able to show such mercy following a tried betrayal. With mood easing, The party acknowledged how narrowly they had evaded total conflict. Regardless of the steady, Iris couldn't hide her lingering fury towards Ruby. Lloyd, yet, reminded her that she had played a larger position than she acknowledged. Doubt remained in Lloyd's tone. He openly confessed that he still didn't know how to deal with Ruby's sudden disappearance and the conflict she had left short. A chilling notion crept into their minds. If Ruby ever returned, the clash wouldn't conclusion in dialogue. Recollections of the Endure meeting surfaced, a monstrous fight that scarred the very earth. The scale of destruction had not once been seen in their realm. Childhood rivalries left lasting impressions. Whenever those two clashed, it frequently finished in trouble yet never in hatred. Celebration followed the tension. Isolde happily explained a towering victory cake, astonishing everyone with her determination to prepare it regardless of the latest trials. Single companion, attempting to lift the tension, joked about the absence of Lloyd's childhood companion. His tone was glow, unaware of the weight those remarks bore. Iris suggested that Lloyd was able to at last enjoy the peaceful existence he constantly dreamed of, yet her remarks stirred anything uncertain inside him. As everyone stayed cheerful, Lloyd's thoughts remained on Ruby's absence. The notion of not once seeing her anew haunted him. To everyone's surprise, a figure darted across the heavens, slicing across rubble with precision. Cheers burst across the square. Citizens and soldiers alike knew her. The major champion had reached with grace and poise. Cornelia Elzebul Quartz, the champion Holy One of Melzeria, descended. Her unmatched swordsmanship and divine sorcery were revered. The holy blade resonated with her strength. She had heard of Lloyd and Iris, their deeds nearing distant apart from the field. As she spoke, Cornelia explained the reality short the conflict. The demons had orchestrated everything. Amid them were skilled explorers, a masterful swordsman, a renowned baker, and a humble nun, every vital parts of an unlikely party. To Lloyd's surprise, Cornelia turned her praise towards him. She called him the real champion, not for titles or lineage. Whispers about Cornelia expanded rapidly. Some were astonished that Lloyd didn't recognize the famed hero saint, renowned for being not solely a holy one yet a lovely, kind warrior as well. Cornelia told her origin with pride. Born from a lineage of legendary heroes, she had dedicated her existence to training since childhood. Every step of her journey had been for single aim to defend the realm from demonic threats. In a dramatic burst of emotion, Cornelia thrust her blade towards herself, declaring her choice to commit seppuku. Witnessing her extreme act, everyone stood frozen. Her inability to sense Ezekiel or the Demon King had shattered her assurance as hero saint, leaving her filled with remorse. Despite of the commotion, Cornelia calmly explained she had already healed. Illusion sorcery had hidden the act, and a recovery sorcery ensured no lasting harm was done, resolved to atone. She vowed to train yet harder. As Cornelia apologized, Lloyd stood silent, her intense will leaving him utterly intimidated. With steady regained, Cornelia formally requested custody of the Fiend King's remains. Cornelia, ever confident, gave to handle the issue of the chemist who fled. Her grin masked the seriousness of her decision, assuring everyone they needn't worry. The escaped chemist, currently profound in the wildlands, had stolen Ezekiel's strength. Lloyd was startled, realizing Cornelia intended to go following Ruby as well, with unwavering will. Cornelia stated her duty to capture Ruby. She warned that yet past bonds wouldn't stop her. Talk of banquets and gratitude followed swiftly. Cornelia's mood shifted as rapidly as her priorities. Lloyd, yet, questioned. It might conclusion peacefully. Ruby wasn't one to surrender. A storm brewed on the horizon, a clash that seemed inevitable. As the party collected in silence, Iris softly called out to Lloyd. He walked forward with a remote gaze, the weight of latest decisions yet heavy on his shoulders. Forcing a grin, Lloyd turned and advised everyone to rest. Though drained, he selected steady over worry, hiding his thoughts behind gentle words. Prior to anyone was able to depart, a sudden idea broke the tension. Cake first. That evening, Lloyd lay in bed, haunted by recollections of Ruby's fury. Her tone echoed in his thoughts, complete of pain and accusation. In his vision, Ruby's look twisted with annoyance. Her remarks pierced him, an outburst from someone once close. Fury started inside Lloyd as he woke, clenching his fist. The lingering weight of Ruby's remarks hit profound, yet he lashed back in frustration, equally wounded. A soft knock interrupted his thoughts. Iris appeared at the gate, cheerful and curious. Caught off guard, Lloyd stepped aside as she entered. With a hidden stash of snacks in palm, Iris stated a tea party. Her light charm lifted the chamber, brushing aside the mood that had hung in the air. Over tea and sweets, they reflected on the fight. Though steady currently, the recollection of trouble remained vivid. Jointly, they remembered every wild twist, Ezekiel's transformation, the throne shrine, Cornelia's repairs. Regardless of everything, she had found a way to bridge the gap with the royal, earning his genuine envy. He acknowledged that lacking her, the outcome might have turned tragic. Her arrival had steered him aside from darker decisions, giving him a route that preserved lives. Still, bitterness yet remained. Lloyd remembered how Ruby had mistreated him, driving him aside solely to seek him down again. Worry crept into his tone. If Cornelia and Ruby met, he dreaded it might conclusion in tragedy. Solely one might survive. A flash of recollection surfaced. Ruby, resolved and mighty. Lloyd's look darkened. As Iris silently watched, both knew that the past wasn't completed with them still. Elevated over the frozen terrain, Cornelia flew at breakneck speed, carrying her shivering passengers across icy winds. Their protests were drowned out by the roar of the air. Intent and unrelenting, she stated their quest: locate Ruby, and if feasible, eliminate Ezekiel elsewhere. A tone whispered of a darker revelation. Deep inside the wildlands, anything old had stirred. The spirit dragon had awakened. With dread in her gaze, the woman warned that a distant greater threat loomed. Neither Ruby nor Ezekiel compared to what was coming. A monstrous form emerged from gloom. If not stopped, the spirit dragon was able to erase the continent. Still, the demon lord dreaded its strength. A storm was about to begin. In the stillness of evening, she jolted upright, spirit racing with urgency. The orphanage had become intolerable. Relief washed over her as she noticed her form had returned to normal. Panic remained, and she wondered if an arcane item had malfunctioned. An unfamiliar figure emerged. Ezekiel, a being she had once merged with malice, simmered in her tone as she expressed regret the woman hadn't died throughout sleep. Abruptly, a towering being seized Ezekiel. Her frantic cries pierced the air as she struggled helplessly in its grasp, shifted to a remote fiend folk settlement. There, old leaders once faithful to the fiend lord stood prior to her. Ezekiel lashed out at the fiend folk nearby her, demanding why they loitered rather of attacking the mortal world. Her outburst drew ridicule. Everyone ridiculed her supposed standing, scoffing at her lack of mana. Single elders softly reminded her that fighting humans was no longer permitted. The era of conflict had already passed in their peaceful settlement. A harsh, rocky landscape encircled the settlement. The fairies' peak range acted as a natural shield, keeping the mortal realm remote and danger minimal. Wandering in a daze, she reflected on in which she had completed up. The demons in this place seemed too steady, uninterested in conflict. Regardless of her reluctance, the villagers provided her heated meal. They assured her in that area was no need to be shy. Any questioning about her past was able to wait until following the food. A steaming bowl of thick potato soup was set prior to her. Ezekiel ate lightly beside her as the woman paused as she tasted it. Thoughts returned to the mortal realm. Vegetables like carrots and onions were common in that area. She longed to experience those flavors. Recollections and imagination blurred humans and demons alike, enjoying meals jointly, united by simplicity. Abruptly, she sprang up and bolted. Anything stirred within her. This wasn't the instant to stay yet. Fueled by desperation, she rejected every warnings. Neither monsters nor mountains might stop her. She was resolved to go again and fix what had gone mistaken. Facing the wilderness ahead, she made her stance direct. Dying was preferable to staying with those who gave up. Insults followed her defiance. Ezekiel ridiculed her, baffled by her loyalty. To her, it was foolishness. Unshaken, she remembered the journey she told with Lloyd. Jointly they had risen from nothing. Everything they produced was earned. Still so, she acknowledged Lloyd not once saw the worth in what they built. His ignorance left him unsealed to mistreatment, and he not once understood why. She slipped and fell into a pool of slime, alarm gripping her as it clung to her limbs. Struggling to rise, she realized she was trapped and helpless. From over, Ezekiel gave her disgust. To her, the woman sounded no distinct from the fiend lord, complete of pride and blind to consequence. Yet the woman glared again, undeterred. She insisted Ezekiel didn't understand Lloyd. At every Lloyd's strength lay in his selflessness. He might risk his existence to defend everyone, even at the cost of his dignity. Regardless of her bitterness, she acknowledged Lloyd had inspired on earning trust, defeating her, and finding an area among humans. Ezekiel's remarks cut profound. She rejected the woman's ideals as meaningless, assuring her that Lloyd had inspired on and no longer cared. Doubt and disbelief flooded the girl's thoughts. Memories of their told past clashed with the painful reality of Lloyd walking aside with everyone. As she sank into the slime, desperation covered her. She pleaded not to be abandoned, speaking out to Lloyd with trembling breath. Seeing from a distance, Ezekiel stayed quiet, the woman's sinking form reflected in her eyes. Then, anything shifted. Ezekiel remembered the agony of servitude, realizing in that place was no longer a cause to continue that suffering. A monstrous being lunged at Ezekiel, forcing her to leap anew. The impact sent her crashing into the swamp, submerged in mud and liquid. Struggling to resurface, she gasped for air. Her current form felt powerless. Alarm set in as she realized she might drown. Just in a moment, the swamp being coiled nearby her and the unconscious woman lifting them both out of danger. Aganon realm, Ezekiel expressed surprise at finding the woman in such a pathetic state following her earlier outburst. The party at last returned to the settlement. Concerned faces greeted them, noting their battered spirits and worn-out expressions. As they recovered, a food was ready with fetched liquid. The huge villager provided fish soup, attempting to ease the mood, but the girl seemed distant. Lacking a remark, she took a stick and started drawing intricate markings beneath the pot. Focus replaced fatigue on her look. Abruptly, flames raised beneath the cauldron. The onlookers gasped it was alchemy, a technique few demons understood. Regardless of the envy, she rejected them coldly. Pride yet gripped her again from telling for help. Then her tone shifted. She acknowledged her origins, her failures, and the crime that made her into exile. Shame mingled with will. The villagers collected nearby her with envy. No mortal had ever crossed the fairy's peak range until currently. They commended her perseverance, learning alchemy from nothing. Surviving exile and arriving in this place showed attempt apart from what greatest could endure. Inspired by their sincerity, she stared into the steaming pot of soup. Despite of being mortal, she was welcomed. The warmth of the meal and their acceptance started to soften her guarded spirit. As she took a sip, her hands rocked slightly for the initial moment. She felt the soup heated greater than just her body. With quiet gratitude, she looked at the villagers. Their warmth and smiles felt foreign, still comforting. From a distance, Ezekiel acted indifferent, yet everyone called her out, joking her to return for greater soup. Her arrival had already been noticed. The villagers joked lightheartedly, saying anyone who ate sufficient might grow big like Ezekiel. Their laughter covered the air, dispelling any lingering tension. Single of them made a vow to transform the settlement into a paradise that might still make humans envious. It made her laugh across watery gaze elsewhere. A familiar figure grumbled about the hardships of following Ruby, uncertain if it was yet value the trouble. Ruby's look emerged on a wish poster. Labeled a fugitive, she was currently hunted across kingdoms, lifeless or living. Lloyd returned house drained, solely to be greeted by a demanding chemist immersed in her research. She hardly acknowledged his arrival, intent on her documents. Regardless of his worn-out appearance, Lloyd responded with a weary grin and received her demand. Afterward, an attendant approached Lloyd, announcing breakfast moment. He responded silently, delaying for an instant as he readied to move. The attendant started maintenance on her arcane item box. Curiously, it stirred with noise, revealing someone hiding inside. To her surprise, the box's interior spanned an enormous space. Amid the vast storage, she discovered herself tumbling and groaning in discomfort. A loud crash echoed as the lady fell on top of Lloyd. Knocking him flat, embarrassed, she scrambled up, apologizing for the trouble. As they cleaned, she stumbled on a cup of bubble tea. Seeing it, she grew puzzled. It belonged to someone unforeseen. Prior to she was able to react, a swirling black vortex appeared. Lloyd shouted a warning, identifying it as a trap that was capable to erase physical cost. To their surprise, the beverage was swallowed by the void. Lloyd explained he normally evaded employing that section throughout maintenance. Amid floating relics, they discovered odd scraps and questions arose. Surprisingly, nothing ever decayed inside the item box's storage. Beyond the chamber, everyone wondered in which Lloyd had gone. Single noted that Iris had already gone to retrieve him. Still, he was yet absent. Approaching the chest cautiously, a lady noticed the lid slightly ajar. Recalling past mishaps, Single of them warned how risky it had been prior to. Inside the box, Lloyd realized it had been sealed. Iris informed him that throughout maintenance, the item box couldn't be unsealed from inside. Elsewhere, suspicions apart from ran wild. One woman pictured the weakest and intimate scene unfolding within the confined space. The notion of the two being solo stirred alarm, though someone insisted they was able to still hear voices from the chest. As someone rushed to force unseal the item box, a sudden cry from inside made both Lloyd and Iris yell out in alarm. Elsewhere, an elven archer threatened anyone who dared interrupt. She claimed the instant unfolding within was distant, too entertaining to ruin Agen within. The chest tipped suddenly. Lloyd and Iris were thrown towards the swirling black hole, once greater alarm setting in swift. Thinking rapidly, Lloyd summoned a wind magic to sluggish their fall, shielding Iris as they were flung across the air together. The crash was rough, still they landed safely. Lloyd checked if Iris was hurt, calmed once she responded with solely mild embarrassment. As inspecting the wreckage, Lloyd discovered the cause of the box malfunction. An excessive load jammed into a tight space had disrupted the system. As debris shifted, a little bundle tumbled, liberated. Iris asked about it, and Lloyd suspected the latest impact had dislodged it. In his palm was a tea pouch and a crumpled note. The message, demanding tea and curry, was from Ruby, written with her usual bluntness. Holding the note, Lloyd paused. He started explaining his past, the emotions tied to recollections lengthy, buried. His tone softened. Monsters had raised his settlement, and the orphanage that took him in couldn't ease the sorrow of his lonely childhood. Lloyd remembered how his sorrow and alienation once consumed him. Ruby's gift to form a party had given him faith and permitted him to rest at last. Their connection had once been sufficient. But over a moment, Ruby's annoyance turned into cruelty, and her harshness left profound scars. Currently, Lloyd acknowledged he couldn't forgive her. The notion of facing her anew covered him with dread. Still so, he didn't want their tale to conclusion in resentment. A section of him yet rejected to abandon her. Iris, inspired by his will, reminded him that his care had brought both strength and pain. Occasionally, she said, "It is okay to walk aside." Speaking with steady sincerity commended Lloyd's unwavering spirit. She respected how he constantly searched for the correct route even when uncertain. Her confession left Lloyd shocked, his look flushed with surprise, as Iris watched him with composed affection. Elsewhere beyond the box, trouble burst. Observers misunderstood the scene, and one woman's wild imagination led her to erupt into a dramatic nosebleed. In the midst of alarm, the item box destabilized anew. A vortex shaped, dragging everyone into a whirlwind of alarm and screams. At last, they were ejected from the box in a drenched heap. Frustration followed, supper was delayed. The box had nearly killed them, and tempers started. As Lloyd lay drained, realization hit. Iris loves me. The idea echoed in his thoughts as she calmly managed the chaos around them. He reflected on how she had constantly been in that place listening, comforting and supporting him across his darkest seconds. Abruptly, an attendant emerged carrying Lloyd over her shoulder. Her arrival, chilly and efficient, brought immediate mood to the chamber. She explained he had been fleeing from a monstrous threat once she seized him for safety. The scene brief her confirmed the alarm. C's fellow described traveling with Ruby solely to lose track of her, due to her careless pace through the dangerous territory. The report was dire. Ruby had crossed into the fairies' mountain range, an area infamous for being the greatest risky in the realm. No one was able to follow her. Despite of the warning, Lloyd made his choice. He calmly stated he might go look for Ruby himself. The fellow in the cell panicked, fearing Lloyd might finish him off. Meanwhile, everyone close reacted with surprise at Lloyd's will. Lloyd knew the road ahead was perilous and reminded everyone that this wasn't their burden to carry. He expressed doubt about what awaited. Yet single matter was clear: he would face Ruby again, no matter what trials that encounter might bring. With her arm raised and gaze burning with emotion, abruptly pleaded for aid, asking someone to go with her on her path forward. Regardless of the threat of strong monsters, she stood her earth. Rather than welcome pity, she lashed out, resolved to act rather of waiting. Her fierce spirit earned wary respect from the odd creatures nearby her, though they reminded her she wasn't single of them still. Once asked to begin a flame, she obliged lightly. Yet, doubt stayed. Changing wouldn't be so simple, and she knew it. Ruby and her fresh companions clutched their heads, bracing for whatever disaster was coming following. An eerie sound rolled in from the mountains. The heavens shifted to a crimson hue, alarming the close residents. An enormous swarm of monsters rose towards the settlement. Ruby shielded herself as rocks rained down from the heavens. In the trouble, she told everyone to flee. A monstrous force hit beside her, nearly hitting as she turned. Shocked, Ruby stiffened at the sight of a towering being with a skull, like look looming over the shattered land. From the ruined heavens, an enormous spectral worm descended, its form towering over the shattered landscape. Alarm expanded as the dragon's origin was explained. It had come from the fairies' mountain range. Amid the rubble, Ruby discovered a wounded partner yet breathing. Despite the earlier trouble, the being stayed unfazed by the injury. Lacking warning, a horde of odd monsters burst forth as the peak crumbled apart. The ground rocked under their charge. As the worm feasted on the invading beasts, Ruby took the offer to flee. She fled rapidly, led by instinct and urgency. A loud crash burst as anything shattered, liberated from the debris, separating violently from the entity known as Ezekiel. Lacking warning, a warrior descended and pinned Ruby to the ground. Her strength and control left no chamber for resistance. The armored lady claimed to have discovered Ruby as pursuing the fairy worm. Urgency covered the air as the threat of the worm grew. While several planned a royal escort, everyone intent on immediate deed. Recognition hit single of the onlookers as she shouted an identity: Albatross. Tension spiked as everyone attempted to understand who the unknown figure truly was. A chaotic party of odd-looking monsters charged into the field, declaring their aid for Ruby. Meanwhile, everyone stayed short to defend the younger ones. As the threat advanced, Ruby's allies tried to hold it off. A tense standoff unfolded, with enemies demanding they palm over Albatross. A sudden strike shattered the beast ranks. A strong figure cut across the foe lines with immense speed and force. Suspicion rose as one warrior confronted a being she believed to be Ezekiel. Her accusation remembered past schemes of manipulation and betrayal. Lacking hesitation, she hit down the mark. The beast was impaled, and poetic justice was delivered by single of its own caring. Surprise swept across Ruby's look as an odd being launched itself into the air. The ground cracked violently under its forceful emergence. Amid the trouble, single partner was pinned and different injured. Despite her wounds, the fiend woman stayed conscious, holding to life. Ruby stepped forward, pleading for the safety of her companions. She attempted to cause with the approaching threat, identifying her as the champion Cornelia. Cornelia paused, surprised by the sight of humans and demon folk protecting every other. Panic began to replace hostility. Abruptly, an enormous crystalline worm loomed over them. Every gaze turned upward as the radiant giant descended. The crystal worm's enormous palm started to tighten, its core glowing ominously as it prepared to crush everything within its grasp. Caught in mid-air, Ruby and Cornelia were flung helplessly by the worm's force. With her blade drawn, Cornelia met the towering beast. She hadn't been commanded to destroy it yet if needed. She resolved to bring it down herself. In the midst of the trouble, someone tossed a lifeline. The party clung to faith as they struggled to stabilize their fall. Cornelia released her divine technique. Surging with holy energy, she descended on the worm with a brilliant, holy strike. She holy technique hit the worm directly, yet to her surprise it opened its jaws wide and absorbed the energy without resistance. Rather of being sealed, the beast swallowed the divine strength whole. Cornelia stared in disbelief, her assault rendered fully ineffective. Debris rained down as the worm retaliated. Cornelia was slammed to the earth, filled by the sheer force short the strike. Rising opposing the enormous beast, she knew its real nature. This worm was no normal threat, it was the foe of every mankind. In the aftermath, the party lay battered. Still, such strong holy energy had failed to bring the being down. Albatross stepped forward with fierce determination, declaring the return of the Fiend Lord. Her arrival shocked everyone, especially given her youthful appearance. Refusing to renew down, Ruby gripped a makeshift arm. She warned the everyone solely those mighty sufficient could wield the sword and survive what came next. As threat loomed, a grotesque being appeared. The blood golem, a monstrous fusion of stitched bodies, stood readied under Ruby's command. Ezekiel was commanded into deed, regardless of bitter mood among the group. The field left no chamber for hesitation. Cornelia took charge, declaring the worm as the top priority. Elsewhere, suspicions stirred brief her, raising the threat of betrayal. Ruby tossed a blood bomb towards Ezekiel, pushing her to use it. Trouble burst as both sides clashed with growing desperation. Ezekiel weakened. Frustration and urgency covered the air as allies shouted her identity, attempting to get her again in the fight. Anew at camp, mood rose. Demands for answers made a confession from a seized demon folk. The reality about the fairy worm was no longer avoidable. She promised to speak, ready to reveal every she knew. Her look hardened as dragons flew across remote skies. A history was unveiled. The demon folk had once reached on the continent, conquering its beasts and reshaping the realm with sorcery. Reports had once surfaced about an unknown arrival profound beneath the fairy's mountain range. To numerous, monsters and demon folk were indistinguishable. That unfamiliar mass lengthy buried below ground was explained to be the fairy dragon itself, massive, dormant, and concealed for ages. As an archaeologist, she pieced jointly the reality from old bones and relics. As everyone rejected it as a corpse, she believed it was merely sleeping. The dormant worm had cursed the realm, spawning monsters. Incapable to generate energy on its own, it depended on holy strength to thrive. To lure prey, it manipulated rules to draw in holy energy despite of its toxic effects on monsters and demon folk alike. Whenever the realm grew saturated with holy energy, the worm awoke. It devoured every existence in its route, wiping out whole civilizations again and again. This constant cycle explained a grim reality: the whole continent served as a holy energy farm to sustain the fairy king. Once refused as mere theory, the warning grew reality. Knowing the threat, single chief fired a preemptive war. A destructive revelation followed. The woman had been formed as a countermeasure, a living arm to prevent the dragon's revival. Ruby wondered why the worm had returned regardless of directed energy use. The answer lay in an unusual surge. Remarkable mana had stirred everything into motion. It had been believed that solely holy energy was able to wake the worm, yet recent events proved otherwise. A surge of mana throughout Roland's fight had disrupted that assumption. Realization dawned: Ruby and her companions may have been the ones who accidentally triggered the worm's awakening. Regardless of Cornelia's work, her attacks couldn't break across. The worm's form stayed unscathed as it started a fearsome counterattack. With a deafening impact, the worm's fist came crashing down, obliterating the ground and everyone caught beneath its influence. The dust settled, bodies lay expanded across the field. Ruby stirred, wounded and dazed, speaking out for her companions. Ruby stood trembling as the worm loomed overhead, faulting herself for the trouble. She struggled to welcome the weight of what had unfolded. Desperation overtook her as she tried to wake the everyone. The threat of being devoured shoved her into deed. The worm's jaws unsealed wide. The earth crumbling inside its mouth moment was doing out. As Ezekiel fell unconscious, Albatross caught her mid-air, resolved to see her quest across. In a crumbling field, a fellow descends with a burning aura, resolved to give his life in exchange for another's recovery. The lady, wounded yet defiant, rejects the gesture. Her gaze widened with fury, incapable to welcome salvation from the single she despises. He recalls the past beat by a champion. He realized his dominance over humans had finished. Despite of his fall, he believed in her strength. She had been born for fight, the strongest of every, fueled by scars and hatred. She practiced to surpass him. Now stronger than ever, she stood solely to reject everything he had once made on her. Albatross coldly stated that emotions were irrelevant. Her strength, he claimed, was by his design. Shock covered her as his remarks stripped aside her sense of identity. Recollections surfaced of her creation. Shaped to be great or monstrous, she had been altered apart from recognition by the single who claimed control over her aim. Yet, in childhood, her feelings were rejected, treated like a provide. She was molded, lacking regard for her will or pain. Abruptly, a destructive blast burst from the jaws of a beast, piercing the silence with raw destruction. Observers turned in alarm as the blast tore across the realm, marking the opening of different chaotic clash. Ezekiel appeared, transformed and carrying the unconscious bodies of Ruby and everyone. The field fell quiet under her grim arrival. Recognition dawned as identities were confirmed. Suspicion about the Fiend Lord surfaced, prompting questions that had lengthy remained. With trembling lips, Ezekiel explained the reality: the Fiend Lord had died, choosing to pass on her complete power in her final act. Emotions swelled. Ruby, shocked and shaken, confronted the weight of what Ezekiel bore, not just strength yet pain. Crying welled up. The suffering, the scars, every made sense currently. She had endured, understood why she had been hurt. A monstrous being roared, its mouth wide with fury, as Ezekiel stood steady and unflinching, her gaze burning short a cracked mask. Lacking hesitation, she released her wrath, faulting the chaos on the careless fools who had caused it all. Her tone thundered with grief. She condemned her creators, declaring they were the cause for her suffering and the existence of isolation she had endured. The field rocked as her destructive assault obliterated the giant beast, leaving the ground shattered beneath its massive form. In awe, the everyone watched. A towering titan had fallen, brought down by her immense might. Ruby met the field with grit, slamming her arm into the earth as twisted monsters closed in. Not every threat had been eliminated. A fresh terror, the blood golem, appeared, and Ruby told her companions to flee as Ezekiel kept the beasts at bay. Covered, she struggled to manage several enemies. A sharp strike knocked her down, pain surging across her form. Regardless of her injuries, Ruby shouted for the everyone to flee. Her gaze blazed with will as she stood her earth. Bleeding and drained, she assaulted anew, refusing to fall, still against a monstrous foe. An enormous tail crashed down, inches from Ruby, as Cornea leapt between her and the strike, shielding her from sure death. Cornea approached with steady disdain, criticism Ruby for her recklessness. She reminded her of the narrow flee from the fairy worm's assault. Ruby, regaining her footing, stated justice. Ezekiel might be gripped accountable, not permitted to die, lacking facing the consequences of her actions. Just then, Ezekiel hit with frightening strength, tearing across her enemy in one brutal motion. Spectators watched in awe. With immense force, she had ripped off single of the Hydra's heads. Her real strength explained. Ezekiel lunged with unrelenting fury, declaring her decision to tear off still different skull from the massive Hydra-like creature. Yet the beast countered with immense force, sending her hurtling across the air and crashing to the earth in pain. Distant aside, a fresh party approached the chaos. Amidst the peaks trembling, they wondered if such madness was usual in this infamous threat zone. As they ventured forward, they encountered odd figures, creatures resembling demons, walking upright and speaking fluently. Single of them wondered the fellow's identity, suggesting a connection to Ruby, leaving the party both puzzled and alarmed. Lloyd rushed ahead in surprise on learning that Ruby was currently risking her life to protect them all. His spirit raced. The Ruby he once knew had shifted, fighting not for commands, yet for someone else's sake. Abruptly, a strong crystal structure appeared, glowing with intense energy, revealing an enormous presence. From within the radiant structure stood a monstrous being with demonic horns and divine wings. Its sheer form radiated strength. Ezekiel realized in horror the being's wings were draining enormous amounts of holy energy, sufficient to shatter the earth beneath them. The monstrous being rose with divine energy, lightning like waves crackling from its wings. Surprise gripped everyone as it towered over them. With unstoppable force, it released a damaging blast. The ground burst, glow and debris engulfing the field in a blinding explosion. Ezekiel was thrown across the air, battered and unconscious. Ruby and everyone watched in horror as her form fell helplessly. Prior to they was able to react, the being inspired again, its wings reared again for different strike, and terror swept across the defenders. The ground shattered under its new assault. Even from afar, the sheer energy left them silent, a frightening display of unmatched strength. Colossal beast loomed over Ruby as she struggled to rise, hardly holding to consciousness as the ground trembled beneath her. Abruptly, Lloyd stood between her and the beast. A glowing shield expanded from his rod as Ruby looked up. Her look shifting to hope, blood trailed from his mouth. Still he didn't again down. With silent determination, he whispered her identity, prepared to defend her at all costs. Enormous blast burst as Lloyd confronted the beast's assault, the blast engulfing him in smoke and shattering waves of force. Across the trouble, the beast's stayed twin heads rose with renewed fury, unyielding and readied for greater destruction. Lloyd assessed the circumstance, realizing the being was able to pierce their defenses. Retreat might solely make them easier targets. As lightning split the heavens, the monstrous entity lunged downward. In a daring move, Lloyd fired himself towards its core. The being swallowed him whole. Ruby screamed as she realized Lloyd had infiltrated the fairy worm's form. Lloyd opened his eyes inside a dark pulsing cavity, disoriented and unsure where he was. Ruby stirred beside him, waking with a start. A voice informed them they had passed out the moment they entered the fairy dragon's body, and that they were now trapped deep within its guts as the creature thrashed outside. The voice explained that the inside of massive monsters was oddly safe compared to the danger outside. Ruby demanded to know why Lloyd had thrown them both inside the dragon in the first place. Lloyd admitted the attack must have hit him harder than he realized, which was why he'd made such a reckless call. Lloyd refused Ruby's request to be left to run on her own, saying he wouldn't do that to her. Ruby tried to move but found her legs wouldn't respond at all, leaving her shaken and dependent on him whether she liked it or not. Outside, Leela and Iris spotted the pair and called out their names in relief. Confirming they had found Ruby, Lloyd answered back, and Leela noted with surprise that he had somehow ended up with Ruby again, despite everything between them. Leela recounted what happened after Lloyd and Ruby had left. The monster known as the fairy dragon tore through the mountain range and appeared. She and the others tried to hold it off, but Cornelia warned them not to use holy energy against it and ordered a full retreat instead. Leela asked where the two of them were now. Lloyd answered that they were inside the fairy dragon's guts, with hostile creatures chasing them through its innards, shocking everyone listening on the other end. Lloyd decided that since they were already inside, they might as well use the opportunity to destroy the dragon from within before escaping. Leela agreed to head to the nearest town to warn people of the danger, and Iris confirmed she would go with her. Lloyd shouted for Ruby to get clear of the wall as a focused explosion detonated nearby, rattling the tunnel. Ruby admitted one blast wouldn't be enough to bring the creature down since its wounds were healing at an unnatural rate. Lloyd snapped that she should have mentioned that sooner. Lloyd asked whether the creatures pursuing them were meant to guard the dragon's insides. He told Ruby to keep running while he used magic to boost their speed. As a massive eyeless worm-like monster loomed behind them, startling them both with its shape, Lloyd yelled for Ruby to stop, warning that going any faster would leave her incapacitated. He remembered too late that Ruby had poor control over her own mana output, and one of the creatures lashed out violently as he processed the mistake. A burst of magical energy sparked and crackled around them as Lloyd cast a spell that flung Ruby elsewhere. He asked, half amused, whether the experience had taught her just how frightening the uncharted depths of a monster could be, while she shouted that she'd throw him in return. Lloyd noted that ordinary healing wouldn't be enough to repair the damage the fairy dragon's attacks caused, since they weren't normal wounds. He drank an elixir meant to cure any injury regardless of severity, only to realize with alarm that it wasn't working on him at all. Ruby proposed that a shockwave could pierce straight through the dragon's guts if the explosion were compressed into a tighter space. Lloyd said they needed to get out of the area immediately, and Ruby explained she couldn't maintain offensive and defensive magic simultaneously, forcing them to move first and plan after. Lloyd confirmed he was certain he had the materials needed for what she was suggesting. Ruby declared she would build a bomb using them, her expression turning determined at the idea of putting something explosive together. The pair looked out over a nightmarish landscape littered with the corpses and remains of monsters the fairy dragon had devoured over time. Ruby realized they could loot materials from the bodies to construct a proper time bomb, then detonate it deep within the dragon's body for maximum effect. Ruby cheered as she secured the first of 28 materials required for the bomb. Lloyd was told that the moment the bomb went off, it would be his job to cast a barrier strong enough to protect them both from the blast. None of the guardian creatures lunged and struck Ruby, knocking her off balance as she cried out in pain. Lloyd shouted at the monster to stay away from her, his expression twisting with alarm as he moved to intervene. Lloyd rushed to check on Ruby, launching an ice spear at the creature threatening her. Ruby brushed off the injury, insisting a potion would heal the wound easily. Lloyd stared at her, troubled, before she pulled herself together and urged him to keep moving toward their next material. Ruby continued gathering components from the fallen monsters scattered through the dragon's insides while more guardian creatures closed in around them. After a tense stretch of collecting, she finally announced she had finished her creation, a Bahamut bomb, powerful enough to blow away an entire small mountain. Lloyd remarked that things would go smoother if Ruby had better control over her magic, since both her mana and her potions were running dangerously low. Ruby shot back that she couldn't help being flawed, then admitted she had always wanted to build a bomb like this one, adding with a smirk that they were illegal to make. Ruby snapped at Lloyd, blaming him for getting wounded even though she'd been the one trying to protect him. Lloyd pointed out that he'd been hurt while shielding her in return, and their argument broke off when Ruby noticed something ahead and told him to look. Lloyd studied a strange lamp still burning steadily, remarking that a civilization capable of building something that ran for years without fading must have been extraordinarily advanced. He guessed it was a relic of an ancient culture, and Ruby gasped, recognizing it as Hecate's light back in the tunnel. Lloyd asked Ruby if she was ready, and she confirmed she was. The Bahamut bomb sat waiting nearby, letting out a single warning beep as the countdown began. Lloyd carried Ruby and ran as the timer ticked down. 3 minutes left before detonation. Suddenly more of the guardian creatures descended on them, and Lloyd realized with alarm that the bomb hadn't even gone off yet, and they were already under attack again. One of the creatures lunged and struck Lloyd directly, tearing through his side as Ruby screamed his name in horror. He kept running despite the wound, refusing to let it slow him down as blood streaked behind them. In the chaos, Lloyd's staff was knocked from his grip and lost. He shouted for Ruby to head into a nearby ruin for cover as debris and attacks rained down around them, the structure collapsing under the assault. Ruby scrambled up broken stone, reaching back for Lloyd as the ruins crumbled beneath them. She told him to leave her behind and save himself, but he refused outright, snapping at her to be quiet as he pulled her along. Amid the destruction, Lloyd said there was something he needed to tell her. Ruby, startled, asked what could possibly bring this up now of all moments, her eyes wide with disbelief at the timing. Lloyd apologized first, then explained that after leaving the atelier and meeting all kinds of people out in the world, he had finally come to understand something important about their relationship. He told her that when she'd first held out her hand to help him at the orphanage, he'd taken it and followed her without thinking anything through. He admitted he was nothing like her, someone who pursued her goals with everything she had, and confessed he had been wrong to resent that difference. Being by her side, he said, had distracted him from the loneliness he carried, and he had been genuinely happy when she asked him to join her. Lloyd admitted that he was laid back to a fault and that he'd grown complacent, never once stopping to consider how Ruby actually felt during their time together. He'd told himself he would stay by her side no matter what, but he hadn't lived up to that promise. Ruby, tears welling, called him a complete idiot through her sobs. Lloyd continued, saying he had acted selfishly and ended up hurting her because of it, believing he had broken the bond between them. Ruby cut in, furious, demanding to know why he was the one apologizing when she believed she was the one to blame for everything that had happened. Ruby broke down, whispering an apology to Lloyd and calling him her most precious comrade despite everything that had come between them. Lloyd held onto her tightly as the ground gave way beneath their feet. The two of them were flung into open air, sent flying by the force of the explosion as the ruin disintegrated around them, tumbling helplessly through the sky together. High above, the fairy dragon reacted to the blast tearing through its insides, its expression twisting in pain as it convulsed and expelled debris and shattered material from its body. Lloyd crashed through rubble and stone, tumbling hard onto open ground. He spotted Ruby lying motionless nearby and called out her name in a panic, rushing to check if she was still breathing. Lloyd looked at the wreckage around them, wondering aloud if the ruins had cushioned their fall and kept them from being crushed outright. Ruby stirred and confirmed they were alive, both of them battered but breathing. Ruby laughed weakly, remarking that their terrible luck had somehow doubled as their greatest strength once again. Lloyd laughed along with her, the tension breaking for a moment as they allowed themselves a brief exhausted moment of relief. The fairy dragon reared up above them, still very much alive and furious despite the damage done to its insides. Lloyd's expression hardened as he admitted they still had to deal with the creature bearing down on them. The fight far from over. In the royal capital, an official rushed to alert the king that something enormous was approaching from the direction of the uncharted territory. The king, unbothered, complained about the lack of elegance in being disturbed so early. As they looked out, the true scale of the destruction closing in on the capital left them speechless, staring in disbelief at what was coming. Back at the site of the battle, Lloyd called out for Iris and Sephilia as they arrived amid the wreckage left by the fairy dragon. Iris responded immediately, addressing him with relief at seeing him alive after everything that had happened inside the beast. Sephilia offered to help heal Lloyd's injury, though she noted the wound looked severe. Lloyd apologized, explaining he hadn't managed to fully deal with the threat despite the damage done. Ruby cut in, insisting the injury didn't matter now, while Lloyd added that Ruby had saved his life even though the attack had caught his arm in the process. Iris reported that they had successfully evacuated the citizens from the nearby town during the night Lloyd and Ruby had been trapped inside the fairy dragon. Ruby brushed off the credit, telling Lloyd that he was the one who had saved her first. Before any of that happened, Cornelia addressed the group, laying out a plan to split into smaller teams to hunt down the monsters that had scattered and fled from the fairy dragon during the chaos. Cornelia descended from above, admitting she had been startled when she saw what she thought was debris the fairy dragon had spat out, only to realize it was actually Lloyd and Ruby. She called out to the two of them in surprise, relieved to see they were alive. Sephilia asked Iris to be careful, saying she intended to keep wreaking havoc on the fairy dragon. In the meantime, Cornelia arrived and asked how the two of them had managed to escape its insides at all. Ruby explained that they had planted 100 Bahamut bombs deep within its guts to blast their way out, though she admitted it still wasn't enough to inflict a fatal wound on the creature. Lloyd asked where exactly they were now, since the surroundings looked unfamiliar. Iris answered that they had landed in the Great Chalk Sand Dunes. Their attention shifted as a horned, dragon-like woman approached. Calling out the name Ezekiel, the horned woman explained bitterly that the hero and the demon folk had joined forces against the fairy dragon, yet had still been reduced to this sorry state. She revealed that the fairy dragon had ravaged and devoured everything they had prepared, leaving nothing behind. Ruby admitted she no longer had any materials left that would give them a real fighting chance against the fairy dragon. The demon woman agreed she was equally out of options, and it looked as though nothing could stop the creature from continuing its rampage unchecked. Ruby suddenly declared she still had one option left. Startled, she announced she would use alchemy to synthesize all three of the powerful figures present into a single being, drawing surprised looks from everyone around her. Cornelia noted that the three in question were widely regarded as the strongest powerhouses in the world, and that if they combined into one, the result could be formidable. Iris and Sephilia reacted with shock at the idea of merging with demon folk, while Lloyd explained the goal, creating the ultimate warrior capable of standing a real chance against the fairy dragon. Cornelia pointed out a critical problem. The hero and the demon folk possessed fundamentally opposing powers and could not simply become one being. Ezekiel added dryly that since the magical device meant to handle such a synthesis had already been destroyed, they'd essentially have to combine the old-fashioned way, with Ruby performing the fusion directly. Ruby explained that with her alchemical techniques, she could construct the strongest possible body to serve as the vessel for the fusion. But she added a catch, since both Lloyd and Ezekiel were already worn down and injured. She would need Sephilia's healing power to make the process work. Cornelia expressed confidence that Ruby's alchemy skills would be enough to pull off something this ambitious. Lloyd turned to Sephilia and asked for her help as well, adding his own plea to Ruby's request. Lloyd acknowledged that all of them might be coming at this from different positions and different reasons, but there was no denying they were all fighting the very same enemy right now. Ezekiel considered this and said she understood. Cornelia added that if they were going to move forward with such a drastic plan, they would need to place their faith in one another completely. Lloyd and the others watched as Ezekiel weighed the decision. She finally agreed, saying that if it meant taking down the fairy dragon, she didn't mind using any means necessary to help them, prompting the demon beside her to voice her agreement as well. With everyone in agreement, Ruby announced that it was settled and ordered them all to step inside the magic circle she had prepared. A burst of energy tore through the sky as the synthesis ritual began, with Ruby focused intently on the process taking shape before her. The group watched in awe as an overwhelming surge of power erupted from the ritual, with Iris exclaiming at the sheer scale of the energy being generated. High above, the fairy dragon's massive form reacted instantly, sensing the disturbance and turning its attention directly toward the source of the incredible power now rising to challenge it. The colossal draconic beast reared its jagged head back, jaws splitting wide as a surge of raw magic gathered inside its throat. Cornelia's eyes went wide with alarm as the light built to a blinding point. A heartbeat later, the creature's massive claw slammed down, crushing the ground beneath it and sending a shockwave rippling across the battlefield. The monster rose fully from the settling dust, its wings blotting out the sky. Cornelia and Ruby stared up at it in disbelief. Ruby's voice cracked with alarm as she realized this was not the same enemy they had already fought. A second colossal threat had joined the battle, and the group's exhaustion was about to be tested further. Against the swirling chaos, a lone armored figure surged forward, blade drawn, cutting straight into the monster's guard. Wind and debris tore around him as he closed the distance in a single decisive charge, his silhouette dwarfed by the beast yet moving with total resolve. "I made it," Ruby gasped, watching the armored warrior land his strike. Lightning crackled around his clenched fist as he channeled a devastating burst of power, a magic circle blooming beneath him, its runes spinning as the spell built toward release. Ruby and her companion recognized the surge instantly. "That is the explosion spell of Lloyd Sama and Ezekiel," one cried, while the other confirmed the combined spell had nullified the enemy's attack outright. The blast tore through the monster's flank in a violent eruption of black smoke and fractured light. The explosion connected fully, tearing into the creature's jaw and chest from a distance. Cornelia watched the devastation unfold, awestruck. "That is incredible. All three of them are in perfect sync," she shouted, recognizing that Lloyd, Ezekiel, and their unnamed third ally had timed their assault flawlessly against the staggered beast. In the aftermath, one of the girls trembled at the sheer cost of the spell just unleashed, murmuring about how much strain it placed on a single caster without proper equipment. Nearby, Ruby knelt at the side of a fallen ally, calling out in concern. Determined, she offered her own life force to sustain the spell, refusing to let the fight end in failure. The battle pressed on. Cornelia's blade found its mark, severing the second head from the monster's writhing form. "We sliced off its second head," someone shouted in triumph, cheering Cornelia onward as she pressed the advantage before the creature could regenerate or retaliate. New threats emerged from beneath the earth as the wounded monster summoned defensive lesser beasts, tendrilled and eyeless things thrashing at Lloyd as he forced his way through their grip. Cornelia and Ruby cried out, stunned by the sudden appearance of these grotesque guardians rising to protect their master. The tide turned dangerous as the creature's coils tightened around Ezekiel, dragging him toward its jaws. "That is not good," Ruby cried. Another voice steadied her resolve, declaring belief in Ezekiel as the world's strongest demonfolk warrior. Cornelia, too, drew strength from the moment, urged on as the perfect saint of their group, refusing to let despair take hold. With renewed conviction, the girls turned their focus toward Lloyd, declaring him the strongest mage among them and insisting there was no way he could lose. Their unwavering faith steadied the group's resolve as the fight reached its most desperate point, every ally lending strength through belief alone. The beast let out a furious roar, its massive form thrashing as a wave of energy discharged violently across the battlefield. Sparks and dark motes scattered through the air as the creature fought back with everything it had left, refusing to yield despite the damage already inflicted upon it. Lightning arced wildly around the combatants as the fight reached its climax. Ruby and Cornelia looked on with wide eyes, breath caught as a single blade hung suspended in the chaos. The outcome of the clash balanced on a razor's edge above the monster's collapsing form. A brilliant flash tore through the battlefield, dissolving the last of the creature's defenses into scattered fragments. The blade fell true through the blinding light, driving home the final blow as sparks and debris rained down around the dissipating silhouette of the beast. Lloyd descended through the wreckage, his armor scarred but his stance unbroken. The finishing strike delivered with full force. Beside him, the last defensive claw of the monster twitched uselessly, unable to answer the attack that had already sealed its fate. Smoke and dust rose in a towering plume as the monster's form disintegrated into the aftermath of the final clash. Amid the settling ruin, Cornelia stood tall, blade lowered, her expression calm despite the destruction surrounding her. Above the battlefield, Lloyd's silhouette cut through the light, his resolve carrying the group through to the end. Their courage to believe they could pull through had forged their path toward victory. Cornelia turned toward the small alchemist with a tired glance and spoke quietly. "You've come to, huh?" Sapphira stirred among the rubble, disoriented, until Cornelia raised a hand and pointed toward the smoking crater in the distance. "Look," she said, her voice flat and heavy with what had just happened. Cornelia sat alone before the massive crater, smoke curling into the sky where the fairy dragon had fallen. She murmured that her duty was finally finished, declaring there was no longer any reason for the demon race to attack humans. Behind her, Ruby confirmed it plainly to the others gathering nearby. The fairy dragon was dead. Ruby admitted the truth to Cornelia directly, saying neither of them had the strength left to keep fighting. Cornelia's grip on her sword loosened as she noted something else troubling, that the hero's protection over her was beginning to weaken. Safiria watched Cornelia rise unsteadily, her expression unreadable. Cornelia spoke of leaving before more trouble could start, saying she intended to disappear before anyone else was drawn into danger because of her. Above them, the clouds drifted quietly indifferent to the decision forming beneath them. Elsewhere, Ruby reasoned that the drifting smoke would keep them hidden from view a while longer. Before she could finish the thought, Safiria's voice rang out calling desperately for Lloyd, echoing across the ruined battlefield in search of him. Iris rushed forward with the others closed behind, calling out to the group in concern. Safiria turned toward her breathless, asking if Iris was safe, the two reconnecting for a brief moment amid the wreckage and confusion of the aftermath. One of the girls pointed downward and said simply, "At your feet." The group froze, confused, insisting Lloyd was right there the whole time. Iris admitted openly that they had lost track of him entirely, unable to find him even standing among them. The confusion cleared as Lloyd was revealed sprawled at their feet, laughing sheepishly while the others crowded around him in relief. One praised him for the immense feat, questioning whether the giant warrior seen earlier had truly been his magic, while another simply clung to him affectionately, calling him Master Lloyd. Amid the celebration, Safiria was hoisted comically into the air, protesting that in the middle of the fight, they had completely run out of food. Iris, confused by the sudden shift, asked where Safiria had even gone in the first place. Safiria's stomach clearly on her mind. She asked plainly if there was truly nothing left to eat, wondering aloud, half-joking, whether pieces of fairy dragon meat might be an option after everything that had happened. Away from the others, Ruby stood quietly, admitting to herself that she had truly been an idiot. She reflected on how she had once given up everything she had chasing wealth and fame, extending her hand to Lloyd as she finally said she understood things clearly now, gratitude replacing her old resentment. A quiet voice reflected on the moment from above, mentioning that this was what Lloyd had been winning for himself throughout his entire journey, a bond and a group of people made whole again. Ruby, Iris, Cornelia, Safiria, and Lloyd all stood together under the drifting mist, no longer strangers bound only by circumstance. Safiria called out to him softly, and Lloyd turned in acknowledgement with a simple "yeah." She thanked him warmly for coming all the way to find her, her earlier fear finally giving way to relief now that he stood beside her again. Lloyd addressed her directly by her full name, Ruby Alchemia, his tone suddenly serious. She lowered her eyes, resigned, saying quietly that she understood, and would go along without resistance. He asked if she remembered what she had said earlier, his expression unreadable as the weight of the moment settled over them. Lloyd explained plainly that this was exactly why he had traveled so far to find her. Beside him, Ruby's expression tightened with dread as he revealed the grim truth. There was now a bounty on her, dead or alive, issued from the capital itself. Ruby's voice trembled as she admitted her fear, saying that if she returned to the capital she might be killed outright. Lloyd called out to her firmly, refusing to let her spiral, while she continued, guilt-stricken, listing the chaos she believed she had caused, the danger she had put the people of Roland through. One of the small creatures nearby cried out in her defense, insisting Ruby wasn't a bad person at all. The others gathered close, distressed, watching her with clear affection despite everything that had happened, refusing to see her as the villain she believed herself to be. The group pressed their case further, pointing out that though the town had been destroyed, they could rebuild it together into something even greater, a paradise even humans would envy. Another voice reasoned that although she might be considered a criminal in the human world, she had risked her own life to save them all, and that mattered far more. Lloyd hesitated, turning the decision over on his own before Safiria interrupted him with sudden clarity, suggesting they go together to speak with the hero directly on Ruby's behalf. One of them turned to Cornelia and asked pointedly whether she too counted herself among Ruby's allies. Now, the small creatures pleaded desperately for her not to give up, refusing to let her walk away in defeat. Ruby turned toward Cornelia with quiet resolve and asked to be taken along with her, choosing at last to face what came next, rather than disappear into hiding. Ruby looked at Lloyd with quiet admiration, remarking that he was now surrounded and respected by amazing people. She told him plainly that he had become an admirable person, her voice softened by everything they had been through together. Lloyd, caught off guard by the compliment, simply looked back at her, unsure how to respond. Cornelia watched from a distance as Ruby spoke of her own resolve. Ruby admitted that settling things in the human world was something she needed to do for herself, refusing to let others carry that burden on her behalf. She added that she too wanted to take responsibility for her actions, so she could finally move forward with a clear conscience. Ruby turned the question back toward Lloyd, asking what it was he wanted to do now that everything was over. She reminded him he was truly free at last and no longer needed to worry about her. Determined, she promised she would definitely survive whatever came next. Lloyd's only reply was a quiet, disbelieving "no way," as if the idea of being free still hadn't fully settled in. Ruby smiled, teasing him gently that he hadn't changed at all despite everything. Lloyd answered honestly, saying he only wanted a peaceful life together with everyone, nothing more grand or complicated than that simple wish shared among friends. Lloyd asked her directly whether she truly believed everyone would just let her leave alone without a fight. Ruby grinned back at him, reminding him teasingly that he was the hero who had saved the entire Western continent, as if that alone should have answered his own question. The group called out their farewells as Ruby prepared to depart. They urged Lloyd to come back to them once he had settled things, promising they would be waiting no matter how long it took. Amid the emotional goodbyes, voices rose together, wishing Ruby well and telling her to take care on the road ahead. Lloyd declared firmly that he would never do anything to bring her harm, extending his hand toward her as a quiet promise. Nearby, the rest of the group watched them prepare to leave together, the two rising into the sky as the others below saw them off, growing smaller against the vast mountain landscape as they departed. A sudden burst of light lit the sky above them mid-flight. Lloyd turned toward Ruby and thanked everyone for what they had done, believing this journey together had brought him the most happiness he had ever known. Ruby answered simply that she was sure of it too, her certainty steady and warm. Ruby mentioned she planned to send a letter to the royal capital rather than travel there directly. Confused, Cornelia asked whether they weren't heading to the capital themselves, prompting Ruby to glance around, suddenly unsure of exactly where they had ended up. A radiant crest appeared before them as a voice declared that Ruby would be granted it, marking her officially. The presence explained there were still many problems left in the world that required her attention, insisting she must continue fighting as a member of the heroes for as long as she carried the mark upon her. The voice continued, explaining that the skill of a talented alchemist would also be necessary for the tasks ahead. It framed the opportunity as a chance for Ruby to atone for her past mistakes, serving people properly as part of the hero's party moving forward. Ruby's expression shifted into fierce determination as she declared that when it came to alchemy, she wouldn't lose to anyone. Cornelia watched her with a faint, approving smile, quietly acknowledging the change taking root in her former rival. Cornelia extended her hand toward Ruby, inviting her to walk this new path together as companions rather than adversaries. The group scattered afterward, each of them setting off on their own separate journeys, carrying forward the bonds they had built through everything they had endured together. Preparations for a grand party filled the halls with color and celebration. One maid remarked that the ceremony at the royal capital had been magnificent, though she admitted this gathering was the one she looked forward to most. Iris agreed simply, saying, "Indeed," while narrating that everything needed to be finished before Lloyd and the others returned home. Iris stood frozen among the floral decorations, lost in thought until Till gently called out to her. "Iris Sama," she said, pointing out that her hands had stopped moving entirely, the flowers left half-arranged in her grasp. Nearby onlookers teased that Iris seemed to be posing like a stone statue rather than actually working. Till apologized for the interruption, offering to handle the decorations herself so Iris could take a moment to clean up instead. Startled back into the present, Iris yelped an apology, flustered as the others asked if something had happened to distract her so completely. One of the girls pressed the real question aloud, wondering whether Lloyd had even responded yet to the confession made some time ago. Iris admitted quietly that she still wondered what exactly Lloyd thought about that confession, the uncertainty clearly weighing on her more than she wanted to show. One girl declared dramatically that if a dense romantic comedy protagonist like that truly existed, she would personally punish them for such obliviousness. Iris sighed, recalling his exact words that he trusted her as a companion, and wondered aloud what he could possibly have meant by that phrasing. The girls pressed further, insisting it was fine to speak freely since it was only the two of them around at the moment. One asked directly and plainly what exactly Iris liked about Lloyd, curious to hear her reasoning laid bare. Iris began to answer, her voice trailing as her thoughts caught up with her feelings. Another girl teased that she probably admired his kindness, noting how gentle he was despite being remarkably strong at the same time. Iris launched into an overflowing, breathless monologue about every quality she admired in him, from his humility despite his strength to his passion for his work, his gentle voice, and even fond memories of a meal she once cooked for him. The other girls stared, stunned by the sheer intensity and detail of her admiration, remarking with disbelief at just how much passion had poured out all at once. One girl pointed out bluntly that the real reason Iris seemed to be hurting was because Lloyd remained so non-committal about their relationship. Another added, doubtfully, that she highly doubted he was truly the flawless paragon Iris had described, joking that Iris had practically deified him in her mind far more than anyone had expected. Iris reasoned aloud that perhaps he was simply matching her pace out of gentleness rather than indecision. The other girl pushed back, urging her to consider being a little more assertive herself, instead of waiting endlessly for him to make the first move. Iris admitted, somewhat surprising herself, that she was actually similar to Ruby in certain ways. When the others expressed disbelief, she confirmed flatly that she absolutely did not want to end up the same way romantically, referencing an old wound from her past. She explained that this very similarity was the exact reason things had never worked out between her and Prince Jeez. Ever since childhood, she admitted, she had developed a habit of trying to seize anything she wanted the instant she desired it, a stubborn streak that had shaped how she approached everything, including love. The conversation shifted as Mars entered, questioned about why she hadn't gone out gathering supplies with Lloyd and the others as expected. She explained there had already been plenty of hands on that errand, so she'd chosen to return and help with preparations here instead. Nearby, another voice reassured Iris that she didn't want to force her feelings onto Lloyd, insisting that a confession was merely the beginning, so there was no need to rush anything further. Curious, the girls asked Mars how she and her companion had first met. She recalled wandering into the elves' forest by chance, adding candidly that she had originally been the heir to a traveling merchant family before that fateful encounter changed everything. She explained that elves enforce strict rules about eliminating any intruder who dared enter their sacred forest uninvited. The forest's appointed protector at the time happened to be Lara, though rather than attacking on sight, Lara had instead become distracted, absorbed in reading a light novel Mars had brought along as merchandise to sell. Curious, the group asked how Mars had responded to the sudden situation. She admitted that back then she hadn't truly understood what romance even meant, recalling Lyra's blunt demand that she become her lover if she didn't want to be killed, insisting fiercely that she wanted to experience romance for herself. Looking back, Mars reflected that in the end, it had all come down to compatibility, admitting Lyra had struck her as a remarkably interesting person from that very first encounter. When asked what her answer had been, she replied simply, "Sure," prompting the others to laugh at just how casually she had accepted such a dramatic proposal. Lara chimed in warmly, reassuring Iris that everything would surely turn out fine, even if she pushed a little harder than usual. She encouraged Iris to have faith in the Lloyd of today, someone who had grown and changed since the uncertain days of the past. Emboldened, Iris declared firmly that once everyone returned, she intended to make another move of her own. The girls around her reacted with surprise, while Iris herself seemed startled by her own sudden resolve, admitting quietly that it was. In fact, true frustration boiled over as one girl called Lloyd an outright coward for still failing to give Iris a proper answer after everything. Another voice cut in, confused, asking incredulously what exactly they had all been talking about this entire time, caught completely off guard by the sudden accusation aimed at him. Lloyd walked lost in thought, admitting quietly that he kept wondering whether someone like him could truly make Iris happy, the doubt tangling his mind until he couldn't think straight. Nearby, Nero muttered under his breath that if he were in Iris's position, he would already have a sword pressed to Lloyd's throat over the delay. Nero confronted him directly on the street, apple in hand, declaring that the only ingredient they could both use fairly was apples and challenging Lloyd outright to a cooking duel to settle things once and for all. Nero raised the stakes further, warning that if Lloyd lost, he would never be allowed to see Iris again. With Cephelia appointed to judge the taste impartially, Lloyd stared back, stunned, murmuring Nero's name in disbelief at the sudden ultimatum. Nero declared with unsettling intensity that he would do absolutely anything to serve Iris a delicious meal, even offering to cook his own organs if she wished it, an admission that left Cephelia visibly unnerved. Lloyd, equally alarmed, called the whole challenge completely absurd as they both prepared to begin regardless. As the duel unfolded, onlookers marveled at how easily the apple's skin flaked away under Nero's knife, remarking on the impressively lifelike dragon shape he had carved into the fruit. Sharp scales and all watching the display, Lloyd's expression shifted as a realization settled over him. A voice cut through his thoughts, pointing out plainly that his worries were always entirely centered on himself rather than on the person he claimed to care about. Nero pressed the point further, insisting that if Lloyd truly loved Iris, then making her happy should matter more to him than anything else, including his own fears and hesitations. Lloyd could only respond with a stunned, quiet agreement, reflecting inward, Lloyd admitted to himself that once again he had only been thinking about his own feelings, just as he had loved Iris so deeply, yet let his fear of Ruby's past pain stop him from even trying to understand what Iris herself was going through. Nero called out in surprise as Lloyd suddenly rushed forward with new resolve, thanking him sincerely for the wake-up call. Lloyd admitted that his fear of reaching out to Iris had come precisely because he loved her more than anyone else in the world, and that fear itself had been the very thing holding him back. Raising his fist with sudden clarity, Lloyd corrected himself firmly, declaring that hesitation born from fear wasn't right at all. What truly mattered, he realized, was focusing entirely on what he could actually do to make Iris happy going forward. Back at the duel, the group stared in disbelief as Lloyd's simple carved apple was revealed among the entries, plain bunny-shaped apple slices that seemed almost laughably basic compared to Nero's elaborate dragon. Nero cursed under his breath, startled, wondering if he had somehow underestimated him. Nero and the girls tasted the simple bunny apples, and something in the plain, humble shape struck a nerve. Nero admitted, unsettled, that he had misjudged Lloyd, questioning aloud whether something so modest could truly carry deep consideration and quiet affection within its simplicity. Cephalia declared plainly that Lloyd's apple was undeniably more delicious, despite its lack of flair. Nero accepted the verdict with visible defeat, admitting to himself that this had been a total loss on his part, the simple honesty of the gesture outweighing his elaborate craftsmanship entirely. Racing through the streets, Lloyd called out Iris's name, spotting her waiting near the elegant gates. She turned toward him surprised, as he closed the distance between them, both of them meeting each other's eyes with quiet anticipation building in the moment, kneeling before her. Lloyd apologized gently for the delay in his answer, taking her hand carefully as the moment settled into something tender and unhurried, free of the fear that had held him back for so long. He looked up at her and spoke plainly from the heart, telling her that he wanted to spend peaceful, relaxing days together with her forever, the words carrying none of his old hesitation, only quiet certainty. Iris's face lit up with pure joy as she confessed in return, declaring simply that she loved him too and that she had never felt happier. Around them, the rest of the group looked on warmly. The whole found family gathered together in that quiet moment of resolution. Some time later, the group stood at the docks preparing for a new journey. One of them asked where the ship was heading, and the answer came back simply to the eastern continent, a new chapter of adventure already calling them forward. Anather added that they even had a guide traveling with them this time, someone familiar with the region ahead. It was explained that the eastern continent was apparently suffering from troubles entirely unrelated to the fairy dragon incident, a fresh set of problems awaiting them on unfamiliar shores. As they disembarked, a cloaked elf approached with a masked companion at his side. Someone in the group recognized him immediately, calling out in surprise, "Black Crow Crowley-san." As a familiar face from the past resurfaced to greet them once again, setting the stage for whatever awaited them across the sea. The small girl bowed her head, thanking Crowley for stepping in during the cookie incident. Beside her, the tall silver-haired elf explained that Crowley had volunteered to join their journey. Crowley's expression stayed sharp and unreadable. He had once stood among the previous hero's party, and that history clung to him even now. A group of armored men blocked the path ahead. One of Crowley's companions stepped forward, asking them to move aside. The masked strangers refused, declaring themselves opponents instead. Their leader's eyes narrowed on the small girl standing between the group, demanding to know if they intended to torment Ruby all over again. The silver-haired elf turned to the frightened girl, offering a quiet apology. She flinched at the words, murmuring her own apology in return before losing her footing. She toppled backward onto the deck of the ship, landing hard among the cargo crates with a pained cry. From behind, a new voice broke in, stammering out that there was actually one more person no one had accounted for. The elf gestured toward the newcomer, remarking that the girl was talented if still a little inexperienced. She explained further that this girl belonged to the same mage guild she herself had once trained in. Tying the two of them together through a shared past neither had expected to matter again. The new girl's eyes went wide as the explanation continued. She had asked to join this journey herself, hoping to sharpen her skills alongside the group. A young man with dark hair leaned in, catching her off guard. She composed herself and greeted him, introducing herself. He reached a hand toward the smaller girl nearby, asking if she was all right after her fall. The twin-tailed mage girl smiled at the exchange unfolding around her. The small elf girl answered with a flustered accepting the hand offered to her. Someone remarked that it looked like this was going to be a wonderful party after all. Watching as their ship sat docked at the pier, sails ready, waiting to carry the newly formed group toward whatever waited beyond the horizon.